not, I can as well. Somebody is echoing. There we go. We're good. Dustin, once we're on the record, let us know. And Blair, I'll let you start. And then whenever you want, turn it over to me for roll call, those kind of things. I'm happy to do a lot of that. It'll make it easier, I think, on you. And that way, if you see any comments and things that we need to catch, then you can flag us once we get into the conversations as well.
That sounds great.
Okay, we are live.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hope everybody is doing well and good and safe where you live. Welcome to the Thursday, June 4th, 2020 teleconference board meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. It looks like we have a pretty lengthy agenda, so let's get moving here as quickly as we can. Call to order. Let's see, I took care of that. The roll call. Roxana.
Thank you, and good morning again. A notice of this meeting was properly posted to the board's website. That was added on May 27th. Everyone from the public is able to join us through this WebEx. The link is on the website. If anyone has gotten an email or needs to share that, feel free to do so. We welcome everyone during these times, and I will go through roll call and then turn it over for the statement of necessity to our attorney. We'll start with Mr. Blair Parker.
Here.
Thank you. Ricky Bursai.
Here.
Robert Campbell.
Here, sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Kathy Ware. Here. Alton Heathcote.
I'm here.
Stephen King.
Here.
Brian Tibbs.
Here.
Frank Wagster.
Here.
Rick Thompson. Susan Ballard Gribble.
Here.
And Mr. Ben Birchta. Okay, we have 2 board members at this time not with us, but we still have quorum and are able to proceed. So I thank you. Because this is done through WebEx, we will do roll call for all of our motions, and I'll be happy to take care of those. If we could, before we move on to our announcements and other items, if we could just jump for a minute and have Maria read the statement of necessity on the record. And then as we do our acknowledgement of guests, we have Assistant Commissioner Toby Compton joining us. So I'll make sure to get him on first in the event that he has to leave us. I know he wanted to make sure to get a chance to chat with all of you. So Maria, if you don't mind doing the statement of necessity.
Thank you, Roxana. Good morning, everyone. I'll just read this quick excerpt to the record. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners, which is taking place by electronic means utilizing the WebEx teleconference application on Thursday, June 4th, 2020. Notice of this meeting was posted to the board's website on May 27th, 2020. As there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity will be read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 8-44-108B2, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communication is necessary. As stated, this is a regularly scheduled meeting for the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineering Examiners. The purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to address regularly scheduled board matters. All voting will be conducted by roll call, and this meeting is taking place by electronic means due to the recent pandemic of COVID-19. Thank you, Roxana.
Thank you very much, Maria. I will go ahead and, as mentioned, with the acknowledgement of our guests, turn it over to Toby Compton, who has joined us. And Toby, I will mute myself and let you speak to the board. Anything at all that you want to ask or share with them. They are thrilled to have you here, if only telephonically.
Yeah, thanks, Roxana and Chairman Parker, thank you, and board, thank you for letting me pop on and hijack part of your virtual meeting. I know it's not always ideal to meet in these kind of virtual worlds, but you know, so far across all of our boards and commissions, this has worked fairly well. Sometimes not without hiccups, but it's worked fairly well across the board. So we've been able across our division to continue to deliver services and have these meetings and kind of you know, meet the needs of these different industries. So thank you for enduring and going through this with us. Everyone obviously knows we're in a unique situation historically. But I wanted to kind of give everybody a quick update and then kind of announce something to you guys, which you already know, but which is the hiring of a new executive director. Just kind of a kind of global update. You know, our metrics are doing very well, including for this particular set of programs. We've obviously seen some numbers kind of fall off, but now we're seeing them tick back up, which is somewhat encouraging. You know, the teams have worked really well. I mean, you know, Roxana, her team, Wanda, have just done such a superb job getting us through this. And once again, you know, hitting those benchmarks and making sure that the public is served in an important way. We're working on reopening the building. So pretty much for the month of June, Commerce and Insurance employees will only access the building on an as-needed basis. So I was in the building briefly yesterday for a few hours, and there was probably about eight people in our division in the building. So we've had a very minimal skeleton staff over there doing just what needs to be done. But as we get towards the end of June, we'll be contemplating and thinking about how we reopen the building, how we engage the public or walk-in customers that come in from time to time, and also just figuring out, you know, what is the new normal. You know, you guys, you know, particularly architects, are probably or already seeing and beginning to think about, you know, what that looks like, what space needs are at home offices, but also probably significant changes to come in office formats. And I think that will be true for Commerce and Insurance. Want to thank Dustin. He's helped out so much across the board with these WebExes. So Dustin, thank you. But also, I want to just lay and heap extensive praise on Roxana. As you guys all know, Jennifer Pack took a different role within the department, and she did a great job. She was a lovely addition. When she got that opportunity to move into a different spot, I had to go and hat in hand and go back to Roxana and say, please, can you help me get through this time? We'll make this really fast. This will be easy. And I promised we'd get it done as fast as we could. And then next thing you know, everything kind of got froze up with the hiring process, and the pandemic hit, and it kind of got stretched out a little longer than we thought. But Roxana and her team just did a lovely job, and I'm really appreciative of that. And it just is a testament to her and her leadership and teamwork spirit. So thank you, Roxanne. And that leads me to Michael Schultz, who is the new executive director for our property boards group. That obviously includes you guys, the home improvement, soil scientists, geologists, land surveyors, and appraisers. So within that group, Michael is the new executive director. I have known of Michael for many years. He's been around town as a community leader. He is a recent chairman of the National Emerging Leaders. He spent 12 years with Senator Alexander's office, so he has a background in public service, serving in a variety of roles with Senator Alexander, including communications and constituent services and some other senior leadership roles in that office. So he did that for a while, and then he went into the private sector for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. And some of you from the Nashville area may remember the local shares group that started the Nashville ETF fund. So there was actually an electronically traded fund on the market that was very unique. We were the first city in the United States to actually have a product where we bundled all of the area publicly traded companies into one indexed fund. And Michael helped start that, helped build that from the ground up, and actually ended up selling it off to a New York-based outfit. So Michael comes with a really wide background of experiences. I think you guys are all going to enjoy working with him. And that was one of the things that stood out to us in the interview process is he's such a friendly guy. He loves people. He loves working with folks and engaging, but he also has a little enthusiasm and has a heart to return to public service. And we felt like out of the group of about nearly 30 applicants, and we did about 3 rounds of interviews, Michael came through as the clear choice in this. And I'll say that there were many good applicants. We had a really hard time kind of winnowing down towards the end, but Michael certainly won the day, and we welcome him aboard. And I think you guys will get to know him. I know Roxanna and her team, some other folks, Ashton and a few others, Dustin, we'll all be getting to onboard Michael. He just started Monday, the 1st, and so he's wet behind the ears, so I don't know that we can pick on him too hard today, but I just wanted to get on with you guys and give you a little brief overview of where we were with the department, and also to announce and welcome Michael to the team. I'd be happy to field any questions that you guys have, if you have any. And otherwise, I'll let you guys get back to the important business of your meeting.
Toby, I for one don't have any questions, but I appreciate you taking the time to just welcome us to the meeting and certainly introduce us to Michael. And Michael, welcome. I think we're a great board to work with, and we do have a lot of questions. So be prepared, but you're going to enjoy this board, I believe. So anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Parker. That was absolutely perfect. Michael, I know before we switch, is there anything, since you're there, that you want to say to the board before we move on with the agenda?
I just want to say real quick, thank you to Toby for the introduction and the opportunity that you all at the department have provided me. I'm looking forward to really getting to know each and every one of you, and also working closely with you. For the last 3 days, I have been working with Roxanna and the team, going into the office to try and get onboarded and up to speed as fast as I can, so that maybe next meeting you will be able to pick on me just a little bit. But in the meantime, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or if you feel like I can be helpful to you. And I am going to continue to work with Roxanna and Ashton, Dustin, to make sure that we have a fairly seamless transition. So thank you all, and I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring us back to the agenda, but anytime I hear another voice, I'll make sure to announce who it is and give you a chance to ask questions. Stop me along the way, so feel free. Next, we have the review of the agenda, any changes and additions. And as you know, we can always incorporate something at the end if we missed it, or a board member wants to add something. We can always do that. I don't think we've got any drastic changes. So at least for now, I'm going to go on with the agenda that's posted on the website that you all received as part of the presentation. And the first matter of business would be to have a motion on the minutes from the February meeting. That would be the last in-person meeting that the board had. And if there are no changes, I would need a motion to accept it as is. And then I will do roll call.
We'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of the last meeting.
This is Susan, I second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Ricky Bursai and a second by Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble, and I will go through roll call. This is accepting the February minutes. Mr. Blair Parker.
Yes.
Ricky Bursai.
Yes.
Robert Gribble.
Yes.
Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Heathcote.
Yes.
Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Frank Wagster.
Yes.
And Susan Ballard Gribble.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The next item of business is accepting the minutes from the March 30th, 2020 teleconference meeting. That information was sent also through email to the board members. That meeting, link to it is available online for those of you that didn't participate, rather than only accepting the minutes. I want to give a quick overview of it. If you've had a chance, obviously, to look at it, that is fantastic. It's on page 18 and 19 of your presentation. We did an emergency meeting, if you will, in March, simply because of the pandemic and the COVID-19 situation. Universities, a few of them had reached out to us with concerns that the money that was approved and the funds they'd received for grants were not going to be able to be used, that they would have to return them, or they wanted to know how long we could extend. As the board will recall, a percentage or a portion of the grants definitely had to go directly towards student programs. And so one particular school was having students travel to Italy, which of course in March was not an option. So they were faced with real dilemmas. Our individuals from the contract division, Wanda from the team, myself, Maria, we all banded together as quickly as possible and looked at the options and determined that we would have, if the board agreed, we would have the authority to move some of these funds that had been allocated for other specific items, such as the exams, bringing in a speaker for a conference. I mentioned the trip to Italy, that those funds could be approved to be used toward COVID-19, given the unique situation. And so that's what the emergency meeting was for. It was telephonic. We put it together, I think, in less than a day. So you had the full grant committee on board at the meeting, as well as our chairman, Mr. Blair Parker, and we got it done very quickly. Really, that's all it was. It was giving me the authority to review these revisions to the proposals from the universities, for the contracts team to also make sure that they're in line with that need, and we got them approved. So it was a very good thing. We were able to move 4 universities to make these changes. The University of Tennessee, Knoxville, University of Memphis, Tennessee Tech, and CBU all have gotten, and we can talk more about that later in the agenda, but this meeting was able to accomplish that. So if you have no questions, like I mentioned, the video of our actual meeting is online. You're welcome to listen to it. We would need a motion to accept this short minutes as they're stated.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is this Mr. Tibbs?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Motion.
Brian, you're good. Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Frank. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Frank. We have a motion and a second. I will do roll call for accepting the March emergency minutes. Mr. Blair Parker?
Yes.
Ricky Bursine?
Yes.
Yes.
You Ware?
Yes.
Mr. Alton Heathcote?
Absolutely.
Stephen King?
Yes.
Brian Tibbs?
Yes.
Frank Wexter?
Yes.
And Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And then I will turn it over to Mr. Blair Parker. The next item is the nomination of our boards and committees. That is something that we have traditionally done in June, and so there was no real reason to delay that. Everyone received that information. Mr. Chris, thank you for joining us. If you don't mind, as we proceed, trying to turn the video off, we've got everyone on audio. It just makes it a little bit smoother, and you should see the button. They vary where they're located, but otherwise, thank you for joining us. You got it. Welcome on board. And Mr. Parker, I will turn the nominations over to you, and I'm happy to assist if I can in any way. Otherwise, I will mute myself.
Thank you, Roxanne. I hope everyone can hear me. With regard to nominations, we typically pass the gavel in June of every year. And my understanding is we have done that historically because June is typically maybe a less busy time of the year for us, typically in the past. I do wonder if maybe protocol should be that we wait for a nominations committee meeting, and I'd like to get the input from the overall board on that. Should we wait to have a nominations committee next board meeting and then continue with this discussion and transition.
This is Robert. Yeah, that's typically what we've done. We've actually had a nominations committee meeting, I think, in one of our earlier board meetings, and obviously with the situation, not able to have that. We do have a succession, obviously, that we use, but typically that comes from a nominations committee recommendation to the board. So I would prefer that maybe we have the nominations committee meet electronically sometime between now and the next board meeting to get that slate of officers ready for a recommendation to the board.
Robert, I agree. It just seems cleaner to do it this way, and then there's no questions that we're abiding by the rules that have been set in years past. Anyone else have any thoughts? Seeing none, then I would suggest as Robert has suggested, we have a nominations committee before the next board meeting, and then we will take this up as a full agenda item at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I've got that noted. And of course, Michael, I think will be perfectly running up and perfectly for the August meeting. At this time, that meeting should take place in person. We would have no reason to think it wouldn't. July meetings will still be telephonic. So if anything changes, we will definitely let the board know way in advance, especially for room reservations and so forth. But we've got that on our to-do list to have the committee meet in August on Wednesday, possibly. But if not needed, we can always have them meet early Thursday as we've done in the past. So we've got that noted for August, and that will still put the board on without any delays on having their full committee. So that's on my to-do as well as Michael. Thank you, sir.
That sounds good. And so whether we meet in person or we do this telephonically, that we will take care of this at the next board meeting. I know that Brian's just itching to take this gavel and run with
it. Just can't wait.
Quick question, Roxana, are you saying the nominations committee meeting would be in August, or should we just go ahead and meet for a brief meeting in the interim electronically, telephonically, however we're meeting?
That is completely up to the board. We can definitely do a quick meeting, whether at the end of June, July, and have the nominations committee go through it all and then just state it on the record in August. If you don't mind doing it telephonically, we can do that in advance of. I think in the past you've done it either the morning of or the day before with the engineering meeting. Either one works for us. If the board doesn't mind trying to the committee meeting group, and that I'm trying to go through my list to see who's on the nominations committee. I've got it here. Rick Thompson is the chair, and of course he's not joining us today, but otherwise Susan Ballard-Gribble is also on that committee to meet. Robert Campbell, you are, and so Ben Birchta is not either. So we have 2 out of the 4 not with us right now participating. I don't think they would mind if you and Susan decide, do you want to call a special meeting for the nomination committee, or are you okay doing it before the August meeting, that day, either Wednesday or Thursday?
Susan, I'll defer to you on that, but you know what my thoughts are.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay. Sometimes the little button turns red and sometimes it goes away. In the past, we have typically had the nominating committee to meet on April, or in the April meeting, where we announce the candidates. We have the first reading, and then we have our second reading in June, and then we have the election. So if the nominating committee could stay after this and continue and come up with a slate of officers, then I think we could send it out to the group and then have the second reading in August and then have our election. So that's what I recall that we've done over the past 8 years. And so I would suggest that. Now, since I'm rotating off the board, when my predecessor is selected, hopefully next month, I would not be in the August meeting. So I think we need to do it sooner than later, personally, because the income interior design representative will have no clue about anybody on the board because it should be their first meeting, assuming the process happens. If not, then I will be there in August. So anyway,
Hey, Susan.
yes.
I just think since we don't have two people here, since you may be rotating off, at some point. Like I said, I think we ought to try to have something towards the end of June, just so that we make sure that we get everybody captured, and then we can make that recommendation, because Susan made a good point. She's not on it. Somebody else is in August. That kind of handicaps us a little bit, I think.
Perfect. If I could ask you all to mute yourself, we've got at least one very loud call coming in that won't, there we go. We got it. I think. So Robert, I think I've got what you, and I happen to agree with you, since we only have you and Susan from that committee, instead of staying on and making some of these decisions, Michael and I will coordinate and send to the 4 committee members, and we'll include our current chairman, Blair Parker, just for continuation at the August meeting in the event Susan isn't with us. Then we will do a special telephonic meeting of the nomination committee with Mr. Blair Parker also participating. We'll send you a few dates to pick from. It'll be a short meeting, but that way at least 4 people are on it as opposed to just 2, and then we will have that to present in August. So I'm tasking myself with us sending all of you, the 4 of you and Blair, that list of dates. We'll coordinate it and definitely get it done in August. I appreciate that. Thank you. So if there are no other questions, and I think we've got a great plan for the nomination of the next board and the committees, I am happy to turn it over to the professional societies. They are next on our agenda. Our organizations have been able to also get the link. I think we've got everyone on board with us. Hopefully you've got the agendas at least to follow through. So I'm going to go through the list in the order that they're coming up, and I think it's alphabetical. So I apologize, not putting you in any other order. I just think this will flow a little bit easier. Ashley, Kate, I think you're the first one on my list, so I will turn it over to you, and then I can get back on, or you can move down the list. I think Dawn Baltimore would be the next, and we'll just go through, and board members that have any questions, of course, they also will jump on board. Thank you.
Thanks, Roxana. Yes, good morning. This is Ashley Cates, Executive Vice President of AIA Tennessee. Hope you're all doing well and that we can see each other face to face in August. Haven't seen y'all since February, so it's kind of weird. Wanted just to give you a brief update on the continuing education. Since we've seen you in February, we've had tornadoes and the pandemic, and so a lot of stuff going on, and we're working, AIA Tennessee and the local components in AIA National are working hard to be able to provide continuing education to our members throughout this current situation. And AIA National is also going to continue to require our members to get 12 health, safety, welfare hours and 18 total LU learning units for their membership. So they're continuing to encourage our members to get their continuing education. And they've also provided free online education through AIAU. And I don't know how long that's going to last, but we've been promoting that to our members over the course of the past several months since the pandemic hit. We've also had a planned conference this coming July in Nashville, and we have the board has voted to go virtual with that. So we are now pivoting to work on a virtual conference to be able to provide continuing education at the level that we've always provided, a high level with really good speakers and educational speakers. So we're going to stay tuned for that. It's probably going to be in the fall that we're going to be rolling that out. And so we're excited, and it's all different for us. With the conference, we're probably going to be going back to Nashville. We had our contract for Nashville in 2020. And so our plan and our hope is to be back in Nashville in 2021 with the conference in July. And session, just going down some bullet points, legislative session is now back. So our lobbyists are busy on the Hill monitoring legislation, and I know we have an update with staff of that shortly on the agenda, so I won't talk too much about that. And then we would appreciate in February we had the Vice President Linda Marzialo come and speak to the Education and Belief Committee in February to talk about the rulemaking. And so we just have a memorandum that I will send after this particular call for you all to review, just to have, AIA's position. So for the most part, that's it. It's just kind of been a roller coaster the past few months. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. That was fantastic. I think on my list I've got next Don Baltimore. And if the board has any questions at the end or definitely wants to stop me before we move on, I appreciate all your input and updates. Ashley, Don, if you're there, I'll let you take yourself off mute. And welcome, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for joining us. If you are able to and can find your video button to take that off, that would be great. Otherwise, we're moving on with the organization. So Don, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Roxanne. I hope everyone can hear me. I wanted to start off by welcoming Michael. Thank you for setting this up, to you and Roxanne and all the staff. Then I just want to say that my report will be very short. I'll work with all the other associations and the board on any legislation, though most of it in the General Assembly seems to have halted. I know there's a new budget introduced. I haven't studied it, and if there's any effort needed on behalf of the A&E board by the Tennessee Interior designers, then please let me know. The only other thing we're working with the engineers and the architects and the landscape architects is with the local metro ordinance that has proposed a new lobbying registration law that might impact the design profession's interactions with codes, and we're working on language with them and hope to work everything out. The other update I have is on the nominees we have sent to the governor to replace Susan when her term ends. My understanding, and then the staff, you may know more than this, but my last conversation with the governor's office was that they hope to do an appointment by mid-July. But I also know that the TBI does background investigations, and according to them, the things are stacking up on their desk. They've been told to put everything on hold until this COVID-19 pandemic crisis calms down some and the administration can turn their attention more to other things. And I assume between that and the legislature, their plate's pretty full. So that's basically what I have, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Dawn, so much for the update. And I appreciate your update also on the nomination piece. That's something I know that interests all of our board members. We have several board members up for reappointment that have actually gone through even the interview process. Dawn is right. There just have been so many other higher priority items on the agenda for the different committees, definitely the governor's committee. So we've just not gotten a lot of those documents back and nominations, whether new or even the reappointments. And so we're being considerate of that. We were told that there'd be a delay due to other priorities. So they've told you exactly right. And I think the TBI piece is also correct. Several of the programs that I have require background checks for individuals that are waiting to open companies as well as get individual licenses. So it's not that one is more important than the other, but we definitely understand the backlog for everyone. So we'll hang in there and work with it. And of course, as you know, until you receive a letter from the governor or the governor's team that thanks you for your services and there's a replacement, you are still hopefully planning to join us and attend and still on the board. So there's no change from our side. If that date has come up and you've expired, we're good to go, especially during these times. So I appreciate that, Don. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no other questions for Dawn, I will move on to Ms. Casey Anderson. I think you're next. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to mute myself. Yes, ma'am.
Good. Casey Anderson with the American Council of Engineering Companies of Tennessee and the Tennessee Society of Professional Engineers. Engineers, I'll be quick. Engineers have been considered an essential business throughout all of this and have been really busy. We focused at the very beginning in the early stages of how do we help keep, how do we put out guidance for our firms who had people who were out on job sites all the time. And things were a little bit different. Core projects were different from TDOT projects, from TDEC, across the board, from private projects. Everyone was following very similar standards, but maybe set up in a different way. So we spent a lot of time making sure that we were communicating that information and giving guidance where we could. We've been communicating nationally with my counterparts around the country. At the first 2 months of this, about 3 to 4 times a week for an hour or two, and we've dropped that back to twice a week at this point. And focus a lot of that effort on what was happening at the federal level with PPP and all of the federal programs, small business loans, et cetera, trying to make sure that our firms could survive this. What we are seeing a lot, and by firms, I also mean some of our public entities that are going to struggle, financially. What we're really seeing at this point is that the concern is coming in Q3 and Q4 and what that might look like. So we're just trying to forecast there and get as much help to our folks as we can. Most of my concerns, or most of my comments really, I shared with the engineering committee that will probably come out in their report later today. We've moved everything online, obviously, as everyone has. It will be a long time before the Tennessee Engineering Center office is open. We are, as most of you know, connected. We've got a wing off of the Adventure Science Center. It's going to be some time before the Adventure Science Center is functioning again, and we share some resources with them in terms of cleaning and things like that. So some of those smaller group meetings that we've had, typically there are 3, 4, 5 different board meetings, committee meetings, et cetera, from some of the technical societies and some of our groups in our office every week. Those are not happening right now at all. So we don't even have a guess as to when that might change. So we're living on Zoom. The TSPE has the Professional Association has a planning retreat this afternoon and tomorrow. ACEC, which is the industry side, has their planning retreat in 2 weeks. Both of those are going to be done online and are going to be very slim, just focused primarily on COVID and helping engineers get back to work appropriately, and helping, how that looks going forward. And other than that, I actually still have engineers have a number of things that are that we keep an eye on that are still active in legislative session, and we've still got one big initiative that we're pushing that we hope to see come out next week. So we think that at this point, I don't know if Nathan's jumped on. If Nathan's not here, it's because he's watching his Senate committee. I just left Cordell Hull watching Transportation Committee. And so he and I have been tag teaming a few things, but it looks like they will be there at least another week, perhaps 2 more. There's some thought that they may come back again after this. We will see. But things are struggling right along, and along with probably all of you, I am saying a lot of prayers right now for our country and for I think we're sort of in a very transitional time with COVID and with a lot of other things. And so just doing my best to help the engineers get where they need to go. That's all I have, Roxana, unless y'all have questions.
Thank you, Casey. That was wonderful. I really appreciate you also bringing us back to everything that's going on in our country and in the world right now. It's all very difficult times for sure. So I appreciate that. I will turn it to Nathan. Nathan, if you've joined us, Mr. Ridley. let me know. I didn't see your name come up. Of course, at any point, if anyone sees Nathan join us, as Casey pointed out, he may be over at Cordell Hall. Is that you, Nathan?
No, I think that was me, just to tell you that he's the Senate committee he's watching, because we can't go in the Senate on the side, but they're active, so he's probably not on.
Perfect. Perfect. We understand. Without a doubt, we would assumed he would be there and very active. So we'll thank you for updating us on that piece as well. And we are, I think, done with this particular section. At the end, if when we do our committee meetings, which will be the engineer and the architect committee, might have something. If anyone else wants to share anything, of course, we will always open it up. I will, though, if we're done with this piece, turn it over to legal for the complaints portion, the legal report. We've got, of course, Maria and Stuart joining us. I think Shalina is also, I'm not sure who's going to move through the legal report. So I'm going to turn it over to them. And then, of course, board members, as you have questions and comments, you can always take yourself off mute and deal with each case as it comes up. Thank you.
This is Stuart, and I will take over the legal report. As you may recall, what we talked about in February, we were going to do the legal report a little bit differently this time to streamline the process. What we've done is also included a synopsis summary of each case to kind of let you know what category we're talking about, the recommendation, the rationale, and then also who the reviewer member was. So what I'd like to do is read the case number into the record and then open it up for discussion or questions that you may have and that I may be able to answer, or also the reviewer may be able to answer. So with that,
and if I can just add, the board members have received the redacted legal report as well as the Excel spreadsheet. So they should have the items you're going through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll start. Number one is 2019-095-601. If there's any discussion or questions, please do so now.
Stuart, would you read that number again?
It is 2019-095-601.
The reason I asked is I'm looking at the presentation PDF sent to us. And number one on that is 2019-09-1011. So it's different than what you're looking at. So the redacted or the revised that we were sent separately is what we should be looking at.
The one that was set separately, the one I think you're looking at in the presentation is from February.
Correct.
Oh, you're right. My bad. Sorry.
The legal report is included in the minutes each time.
Yes, this would have been the separate item on your email that is the current redacted legal report. Stuart, so other than the case number, and I wasn't with you all at the February meeting, so I apologize. That's my fault. You're not going to read any type of summary or anything, just the case number, not who the reviewer was. You're just going to open it up if they have questions and then proceed.
Well, I was going to ask. Thank you, Roxana, because I thought we always used to have the whole read it to the record thing, so we're not going to do that.
That's what we discussed in February, was that you would review the legal report. I can read more into it, such as who's reviewed, the mitigating factors, aggravating factors, and recommendation.
Yeah, that would be great. I think, Stuart, just because, as you know, until the cases are fully resolved, they're not open out there on the DAR report or anything else. So at least it gives us a clear picture, a little bit more information, and then eventually they do become part of the minutes. So the next meeting they get on there, but at least to have a little bit more on the record.
Yeah, because excuse me, but Roxana, so what we're saying is the document that we have in front of us, which is the legal report, is not something that necessarily is a public document. People who are calling in or listening in don't necessarily have this. Is that correct?
That is correct. It will become a public document as part of the minutes next time in August. So that's what your meeting minutes have from February. For those right now listening, if all they hear is a number, they're really kind of at a complete loss. So I think just something simpler, maybe not as much as we did before. Absolutely, I agree with you. Thank you.
And hey, Roxana, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
Chris Gwaltney, he said in the chat, ASCE is continuing their monthly meetings remotely and are offering continued education for those meetings. And I'll just say, if you do have something you want to talk about, try and use the chat just to say that you want to have something to speak out loud, and kind of try and refrain from actually having, a more substantial conversation in the chat, just so we're being as transparent as possible.
Perfect. Oh, I appreciate that, because I hadn't scrolled far enough to see that notes were being added, and that's because I'm focusing on the other documents. So, Chris, without a doubt, also, unless you're going to log off, you're welcome then to share this with the group toward the end. I'm sorry I didn't call you sooner, but absolutely his sharing that ASCE is continuing to offer their monthly meetings remotely. That is great information to have. I agree with Dustin. Just a quick note, that you want to speak on the record shortly. We'll make sure to catch it. If I don't, Dustin will. That's the plus to having him with us. So that was perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, for adding that. I think we're in agreement. Stuart, if you don't mind adding that little bit extra, and then I'll turn it back to you. I'm sorry I had to step in.
Okay, that's fine. And what I'll do is I'll kind of go through the category and the recommendation that we have on the summary, synopsis summary.
Perfect.
A little bit more. So number one is 2019-095-601. What we're looking at here is a possible violation of misrepresentation to a prospective client. There was one RFQ that was in violation. The reviewing member was Robert Campbell. There's no aggravating factors, but the recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty of $500 and have the principals take and pass a laws and rules exam. Are there any questions?
This is Kathy. Just to clarify, so this would be a violation by a firm, not a violation by a registrant. Is that what I understand?
Yes, this was a firm. There were previous employers or employees that went to another company.
Okay. Thank you. Just want to clarify.
Stuart, are you wanting a motion for each case for me to call out, or if there's no further conversation, is the conclusion that they're agreeing with your recommendation and we can proceed and maybe do votes at the end for those that follow? I'm good with that.
And so I will go ahead and announce, can we go ahead and have a motion if there's no more discussion or questions?
I will make a motion to take the recommendation of $500 penalty and take and pass the law.
Second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second, and we're talking about case number 1 to agree with the recommendation. I will do roll call. Mr. Ricky Bursey?
Yes.
Mr. Blair Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Brian Tibbs?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yeah.
Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble?
Yes.
Mr. Rick Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Frank Wagster?
Yes.
Ware?
Yes.
Mr. Alton Heathcote?
Yes.
Mr. Stephen King?
Yes.
All in agreement. Thank you. We'll go on to number 2, Stuart.
Okay, number 2 is 2020002481. This is a self-report practicing on an expired license. The reviewing member was Stephen King. Looks like the respondent stamped one drawing while the license was expired. The mitigating factors are it was self-reported and there's no previous history. So the recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $500 for practicing engineering on an expired license and pass the laws and rules exam. Any questions? Or can I have a motion?
Yeah, this is
So
Frank.
moved.
I'll second the motion.
I apologize. I need the name for the first motion. Who was that?
I'm sorry, it was Rick Thompson.
Rick. Thank you so much, Rick. I apologize. And the second came
No
from?
problem.
Frank.
Frank, thank you very much. We have a motion and a second to go with the recommendation. I'll go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker. Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Ricky Bursine.
Yes.
Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble.
Yes.
Rick Thompson.
Yes.
Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Ricky Ware.
Yes.
Elton Heathcote.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And Stephen King.
Yes.
We're on to case number 3.
Number 3, 2019-099681.
We've got a heavy breather. Can somebody put their thing on mute?
This case is alleged unlicensed activity and also on an expired license. Respondent is performing landscape architect work without a license on expired license. This was reviewed by Blair Parker. There's no mitigating factors. Aggravating factors are no response to the board. I have sent this complaint to the respondent several times and it has been accepted. We do have a green card. The recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $22,000 for designing 22 projects under an expired license and using the designation of landscape architect while unlicensed. Also request that the respondent renew his license within 30 days. Have any questions?
Stuart, just one quick comment on the Excel spreadsheet. We've got $23,000. If we can just make sure.
That should be
That's
22.
No worries. Thank you.
Stuart, this is Blair. I just want to make sure that we're consistent. As I recall, there's no real aggravating factors here other than no real correspondence from this individual. But the $1,000 per project, is that consistent with what we have done in the past?
Usually it's $500 per project. However, this person, has not responded, and we know that it's been received. And he's been unlicensed since 2017. And these are very large projects that are happening.
Okay.
Stuart, this is Ricky. So it does sound like then we are considering the aggravating factor for each, that there was no response to the board. Otherwise, if there was no aggravating factors, it seems like it would be $750 per offense. So is that correct? We are considering aggravating factors.
Yes, you're correct. It would be $750, but most of the time we have mitigating factors, self-reporting and things like that. So this one has not been self-reported, and there's been no response.
Got it. Thank you.
This is Brian Tibbs. Don't we do something also like a cease and desist or something like that too, to not just get your license renewed, but you need to stop working, or is that inherent to what this recommendation is?
Yes, sir. That's in the proposed consent order that's sent to the respondent.
Okay, thank you.
This is Frank. I move we approve the recommendation.
I second it, Brian Tibbs.
Thank you. We have a motion for Mr. Frank Waxter, a second for Brian Tibbs. I will go through roll call to approve and go with the recommendation from legal counsel. Mr. Blair Parker?
If I'm allowed to vote, I say yes.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Tibbs?
Yes.
Ricky Bursey?
Yes.
Robert Campbell?
Yes.
Ballard Gribble?
Yes.
Rick Thompson?
Yes.
Frank Waxter?
Yes.
Kathy Ware?
Yes.
Alton Heathcote?
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King?
Yes.
In agreement. Thank you, board members. We're on to case number 4.
Number 4 is 2020010351. This is a self-report for practicing on expired license. Respondent stamped 13 projects while expired. Review member was Alton Heathcote. Mitigating factors is self-reported. There's no previous history. And the projects were limited in scope and hours. The recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty of $3,250 for practicing engineering on expired license and pass the laws and rules exam. Are there any questions? Have a motion?
This is Susan. I make a motion that we accept the recommendations by legal counsel for the $3,250 penalty.
This is Robert. I second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble and a second by Mr. Robert Campbell. I will go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker?
Yes.
Brian Tibb?
Yes.
Ricky Bursey?
Yes.
Robert Campbell?
Yes.
Ballard Gribble?
Yes.
Rick Thompson?
Yes.
Frank Waxter? Kathy Ware? Kathy Ware?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King?
Yes.
Thank you. We are on case number 5.
Number 5 is 2020010811. This is also a self-report to practicing on expired license. Respondent stamped 1 report. Reviewing member was Stephen King. Mitigating factors are self-reported and there's no previous history. Recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $500 for practicing engineering on an expired license and pass the laws and rules exam. Have any questions?
I've got a quick question, and it's not necessarily related to this case, but we have just done roll call vote with non-voting members asked to vote. Does that have any impact on our vote?
I don't believe so, Robert, because we are doing this telephonically and we, it's not that Alton and Stephen would cost the vote to change. We've got quorum, but because we're all participating telephonically and they're part of the board on applications, it's very important that we have the engineers that can vote on applications, always in agreement. But I think as part of the full board, it's important to take everybody through roll call. Maria, if you think I'm wrong, I can stop, but I think that the full board needs to be called out.
Yeah, I agree with you, Roxanna.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to number 5. Someone doesn't have us on mute that has a loud noise going on so that Stuart can proceed. I think we're still waiting on motion or conversations on case number 5. Robert, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, but I'm still a little. When we're in person, we don't accept those. I don't really care. I just want to make sure that we're not invalidating a vote. And if we come down to something where we disagree on, are we counting their vote? And that's my only concern. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything correctly.
And I think in person, it's a little different because we have the conversation. We can raise, our plaques when you have questions and so forth. And then in the end, we just have a unanimous vote or those in opposition. With us being telephonic, it's harder to do that. So roll call, I think, covers every one of the appointments that we have on the board. And if we had a disagreement, then I would make sure to have legal counsel help me with the vote and we determine how we proceed. But I think for now we're okay, definitely counting everyone.
Could I make a comment while we've stopped?
Absolutely.
This is Steve. I think according to Robert's rules, when we get a motion and a second, we should ask for any more discussion before we go straight to roll call, but I could be wrong.
And I think Stuart's giving us that opportunity, but Stuart, if you want to voice it differently before roll call, I'll turn it back to you.
What was the question again?
That to follow Robert's rules of law, once we have a motion and a second, it needs to be open for discussion.
I believe that's correct, yes. So we'll do this one differently.
Thank you.
So do I have a motion on number 5?
This is Frank Wagster. I so move.
Rick Thompson, I second.
Are there any questions? Okay, Roxana.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions, I will go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursey.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Susan Ballard-Gribble.
Yes.
Mr. Rick Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
All our members are in agreement. Stuart, you're on number 6.
Number 6 is 2020011 Respondent required continuing education after the requested audit period. The reviewing member was Susan Ballard-Gribble. Mitigating factors was respondents completed the required hours. The recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty of $500 for failure to maintain CEUs. Do I have a motion?
This is Blair, so moved.
I will second the motion.
Are there any questions or discussion? Roxanne?
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Blair Parker, a second by Ricky Bursey. Hearing no other questions, I will go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursey.
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Susan Ballard-Gribble.
Yes.
Rick Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Mr. Alton Heathcote.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. All in agreement. Stuart, you're on number 7.
Number 7 is 20200132231. Respondent self-reported practicing on expired license and stamped 1 design. Reviewing member was Ricky Bursey. Mitigating factors self-reported, no previous history. Recommendations authorize a civil penalty of $500 for practicing engineering on an expired license and pass the laws and rules exam. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Rick Thompson.
Any questions or discussion? Roxana?
We have a motion on number 7 by Mr. Blair Parker, a second by Mr. Rick Thompson. I will do roll call. Mr. Blair Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Brian Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursey,
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble,
Yes.
Mr. Rick Thompson,
Yes.
Mr. Frank Wagster,
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Alton Heathcote,
Yes, ma'am.
and Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. We're on to number 8.
Number 8 is 20200-14471. Respondent self-reported a discipline action in another state, and all the alleged violations that happened were before the respondent renewed the license on October 29, 2019. Respondent did answer yes to the application question regarding whether the applicant had been subject to disciplinary action by another government agency in the last 2 years. Reviewing member was Ricky Bursey. Mitigating factors self-reported and is compliant in Tennessee. So the recommendation is to send a letter of warning. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Frank, I'll second the motion.
Any questions or discussion?
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Blair Parker, a second by Mr. Frank Wagster. We'll go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Brian Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursey,
Yes.
Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble,
Yes.
Mr. Rick Thompson,
Yes.
Frank Wagster,
Yes.
Ms. Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Mr. Alton Heathcote,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Stuart, we're on number 9.
Number 9 is 20200-13521. Complainant is alleging the respondent is was gross negligence and misconduct and professional conduct against the respondent, and I think there was just some disagreement between the two parties. There was no misconduct or coercion or anything found in the emails that were alleged. The reviewing member was Robert Campbell. Mitigating factors are that there's no evidence of coercion or misconduct, and the recommendation is to close. I have a motion.
I will make a motion to take the recommendation.
Second. Blair.
Are there any questions?
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Ricky Bursey, a second from Mr. Blair Parker. I'll go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker,
Yes.
Brian Tibbs,
Yes.
Ricky Bursey,
Yes.
Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble,
Yes.
Rick Thompson,
Yes.
thank you,
Oh,
Frank
sorry.
Wagster,
Yes.
Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Alton Heathcote,
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. We're on number 10.
Number 10 is 20200-18111. Respondent self-reported practicing on expired license. They performed 8 projects, stamped projects, while their license was expired. The reviewing member was Stephen King. The mitigating factors is self-reported, but also the respondent was with a company that had a third party that was responsible for the renewal, and apparently that third party was terminated, and so that's how they kind of found out that their license was expired. Recommendation, however, is to authorize a civil penalty of $4,000 for practicing on an expired license and pass the laws and rules exam. Have a motion.
This is Frank. I move that we accept the recommendation of the legal counsel.
I second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Roxana?
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Frank Waxter, a second by Mr. Ricky Bursey. No other conversations. I will go ahead and go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker,
Yes.
Brian Tibbs,
Yes.
Bursey,
Yeah.
Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble,
Yes.
Rick Thompson,
Yes.
Frank Waxter,
Yes.
Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Alton Heathcote,
Yes, ma'am.
and Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. We are on number 11. I think we've got a total of 18 cases. Stuart, I'll turn it back to you.
Number 11, 20200-18731. Respondent self-reported practicing on expired license. Respondent is works for the City Water Management Department. Reviewing member was Stephen King. Mitigating factors, self-reported, and no projects were actually sealed or stamped during the expired time. The recommendation is to close. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
This is Frank. I second the motion.
Are there any questions?
Hearing no other questions, this is Rock. I'll go through roll call. We have a motion by Mr. Blair Parker, a second by Mr. Frank Waxter. Roll call, Mr. Blair Parker,
Yes.
Tibbs,
Yes.
Mr. Ricky Bursey,
Yes.
Mr. Robert Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble,
Yes.
Mr. Rick Thompson.
Yes and yes.
Thank you. Frank Wexter,
Yes.
Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Alton Heathcote,
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King.
Yes.
All right, number 12. If everyone will please mute us as Stuart, I'll turn it over to you again.
Number 12, 20200-14561. Respondent self-reported out-of-state disciplinary action for associating with a company that was not registered in that state. However, there's been no violations of Tennessee laws and rules. However, the reviewing member, Alton Heathcote, stated that the same practice may be occurring in the state, but the mitigating factors is self-reported and there are no violations of Tennessee laws or rules. Recommendation is a letter of instruction regarding Chapter 0120-06-.03, which requires firms to comply with TCA 62-2-601, 0120-06-.04, which defines responsible charge, and 62-2-601A and B, and 62-2-602, which dictate requirements and conditions for registration in Tennessee. Do I have a motion?
This is Rick Thompson. I make the motion.
Brian Tibbs, I second.
Do I have any questions or discussion?
This is Rick Thompson. Typically, we require them to take the law and rules exam and pass that. Could we amend the motion to require that, please?
And what we could do is we can add that to the recommendation. I would need a motion to pass the laws and rules exam also, along with a letter of instruction.
Hey, Stuart, this is Alton. This is really more of an issue related to a firm offering to practice in the state but not wanting to register the firm in the state. It's really not an individual practice. If it were an individual, I think we could probably do that and recommend passing the laws and rules exam, which we ordinarily do. Since it's a firm-based issue, not an individual issue, I think that may be a little difficult.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, Alton, this is Robert. In my recommendation earlier, I said that the principals would need to pass the law and rules exam. So I think if the principals are the ones that are encouraging this behavior, then they need to be cognizant of what the rules are breaking, and they need to take and pass it. It's and let me ask you a question. So this firm has said that they are providing an engineered product, but they're not the engineers of record. Explain that to me.
It's a metal building manufacturer, Robert. This is Alton, I'm sorry. It's a metal building manufacturer. And they distribute their product over a number of states. They do have an engineer on their staff that seals those drawings before they send them to contractors, but they are providing structural design. And they are submitting those and building those structures, and the contractors using those structural designs in the state of Tennessee.
So then how are they not doing engineering?
I think they are doing engineering, and he is licensed in the state, but they refused to file a disclosure form. That was the issue.
I'm a little confused about why that is not a violation of the Tennessee laws and rules. Typically, I think what I see is that metal building manufacturers like this stamp the building structure, and then there's a local engineer who has to do the foundation design that stamps that design. So I'm not sure why there's not a violation of the Tennessee laws and rules. And in the past, we have said we didn't want to ask somebody to take and pass the laws and rules test if they didn't actually violate a rule. We backed off of that. So anyway, those couple of questions there are they actually violating a rule?
Again, the issue, our laws and rules require any firm that's practicing architecture, engineering, landscape architecture, right, acting as a registered interior designer, has to have a firm disclosure form that they file with the state of Tennessee. This company does not want to file the firm disclosure form for some reason. And they use the umbrella of TCA 62 Section 2, which is very, very broad, to indicate that they don't have to. But I researched that in depth, and I can't find anything in TCA 62 Section 2 that would give them that exemption. So it's not, they are practicing in accordance with our guidelines. They have a registrant. He is sealing the drawings. They are a sub-consultant. The issue is not that they're practicing without a license or they're not sealing the drawings appropriately, etc. The issue is that they say that they should be exempted from having to file a firm disclosure form in the state of Tennessee. And the rules that I've cited are the ones that dictate that you have to file a firm disclosure form.
Have they done work in Tennessee where they stamp drawings in Tennessee?
Yes, they have.
Alton and Ricky, this is Roxana. I'm hoping what I'm going to clear up is going to clear it up and not confuse it more. Case number 2020-014561 is on the professional engineer, not the firm. So this is the person that's self-reported, and he is a licensee, not the firm itself that's looking for this loophole or caveat to not report. So this is on that individual that potentially, Alton, or probably thought the firm was properly registered. Am I correct?
No, they were not. They did not think they were properly registered. I'm sorry. They're registered and licensed as a professional engineer, but they're not registered as a firm.
Correct.
And they didn't want to complete the disclosure form and register as a firm.
Right, but this complaint is on the professional engineer.
It's on the individual.
Not the firm, it's on the individual.
That's correct, but it's an individual that represents the interest of the firm, and his assertion is the only thing that we had asked him to do, if they're going to practice in the state, is file a firm disclosure form, and this individual who represents the interest of the firm has basically said, I don't think we need to do that.
Hey, Alton, this is Robert. And Roxanne, I think you understand this, but do we then not need to open a complaint against the firm for not having a firm registration form if they're practicing engineering?
Stuart, I don't know if in the process you reviewed whether the firm's accurate in stating that they potentially don't need to register, but yes, we could open against the firm as well. I just wanted to clarify that this case was on that individual, not the firm, but we could. It appears they're not registered as a firm either way, so.
We can open up a complaint if we see that they're not registered and they don't have a firm disclosure. That's not a problem. But right, this actual complaint is just a self-report by the individual.
But the individual who was stamping plans and submitting drawings to TDEC for review was what said his firm is not willing to submit a firm disclosure form. He didn't say he as an individual wasn't willing to get registered. He's already registered. He's saying that his firm is not willing to file a firm disclosure form.
This is Blair. So is he providing services as an individual in the state of Tennessee?
He's providing services. That's a good question, Blair. He's providing services on behalf of his firm in the state of Tennessee. Not individually, but as part of his firm.
So that seems in direct violation of our rule. And I say that because in the laws in Mississippi are different than certainly Tennessee. And the way that it's set up, and I know many design firms, architects and engineers in particular, will provide work as individuals in the state of Mississippi because of the lengthy registration and expensive registration required in the state of Mississippi. What we're asking in Tennessee is something so totally different. But if he is providing a service in our state, and the firm that he is representing is not registered, then I think he's in direct violation.
This is Stuart. It's like that. I say something is that the firm disclosure is for North Carolina. It's not for Tennessee. We would have to look into whether this company or this individual is actually doing business in Tennessee. There was
Stuart, they are doing business in Tennessee because he stated that he submitted drawings to TDEC for review and approval. He submitted plans and specifications to TDEC for review and approval. And in the correspondence that you had sent me, you indicated that, and I'm quoting, legal believes the registrant is not liable, but this complaint was opened against the firm. So apparently there is a complaint open. maybe in North Carolina, but or somewhere else. But my perception was that it was in Tennessee.
I'm looking at the documents, and I believe that we do actually have an open complaint against the company.
Yeah, this is Frank. I've got a question for y'all. Do y'all have access to the actual product that was produced? In other words, was there a set of drawings with a title page that had the company name and then the seal by this engineer? Implying that the company is providing the service. Do we have that?
I believe
The
the
Go
company,
ahead, Stuart.
There is an open complaint against the company, but it's not on this report. It'll be on the next meeting's report. So we're looking into this. I'm sorry for any confusion on that.
Frank, in answer to your question, I wasn't provided any plans or specifications, but the respondent stated that he had stamped plans and specifications and submitted them to TDEC for review. And his question was, was he in violation himself if he stamped those plans without the firm having a disclosure? And the answer is he's not necessarily in violation, but the firm is for not having filed the appropriate disclosure form for practice in the state.
And that is correct. And that's why the recommendation on this is just a letter of instruction to the individual. But there is a pending complaint against the company, like I said.
This is Rick Thompson. Since this is for the individual, I think my statement that he should take and pass the law and rules exam is valid, and that's my point. So, and could I also say that I can barely hear? There are 2 or 3 mics that are open. A Chris Russell, Maria, and whoever's talking, and it's really distracting. So please cut your mics off. Thank you.
This is Maria. I called in, and so there's not an option, but I'm muted on my iPhone. So that's why you might see open mics for some of us who have called in but are muted on our cell phone.
Well, that's I understand that. That's fine. But whoever's got open mic wherever they are, there's a lot of conversation and feedback in the background. So just pointing it out. So thank you.
So Rick, I believe we have a motion on the floor. We also have a second, but you were wanting to revise that motion?
Yes, that was my intent. And I would like to revise that motion to include taking the laws and rules exam and passing the laws and rules exam, because this is an individual and that individual is working for a company, and that falls under the laws and the rules. So to me, it's pretty clear. So I'm just putting that out there. So thank you.
Rick, I agree with you. This is Robert. And I'll go mute my microphone now so I don't get in trouble.
Good boy.
I'm sorry, I don't recall. Robert, did you make the second?
I think Mr. Tibbs did. Is Mr. Tibbs still in agreement with the second?
Yes, I am.
This is Ricky. I agree with the laws and rules after hearing all the conversation, because I'm not sure that if I'm a professional engineer working for a company, that I shouldn't refuse to stamp a drawing if I know my company is not registered with the state. in that I'm supposed to know the laws and rules. So I agree with taking the laws and rules test in this instance.
So do we need to strike the previous motion and second and then add to the motion to pass the laws and rules exam?
I think Ricky, who had made the first, I think Ricky, that was Bursai, that was you on just a minute ago, saying that you agree with adding the rules and laws, and you had made the motion. Mr. Brian Tibbs also agreed, and he had the second. Is that, will that work, Stuart, or do you want brand new motions?
If Ricky is amending his motion to add that, I mean, we're just adding it to the recommendation. That's
No, Ricky, I didn't make, this is Ricky. I did not make the motion. I think Rick Thompson made the original motion and then amended it to add the laws and rules. Is that right, Rick?
That is correct.
Correct. Thank you.
That's fine. Now we just need to vote.
Okay, there's no further discussion on case number 12 as amended by Mr. Rick Thompson to include to the recommendation adding the passing the laws and rules. We have a second also by Mr. Brian Tibbs. I'll go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker.
Yes.
Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Bursai. Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble.
Yes.
Rick Thompson.
Yes.
Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Alton Heathcote.
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you, board members. We're on to number 13.
Number 13, 202002141. Respondent self-reported practicing on expired license. They did seal one report during the expiration. The reviewing board member was Ricky Bursai. Mitigating factors of self-reporting, no history of violations. The recommendation is authorize a civil penalty of $500 for practicing engineering on an expired license and pass the laws and rules exam. Do I have a motion?
This is Blair. I make a motion to approve the recommendation of legal.
This is Kathy. I'll second.
And are there any questions or discussion? Roxana?
Thank you. Hearing no other questions, I'll take roll call. Mr. Blair Parker.
Yes.
Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Ricky Bursai.
Yes.
Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble.
Yes.
Rick Thompson.
Yes.
Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Alton Heathcote.
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. We're on to case number 14.
Number 14 is 20200266661. Respondent self-reported out-of-state disciplinary action on the application. There were no violations in Tennessee. The reviewing member was Frank Wagster. Mitigating factors are that there's no violation in Tennessee and reported previous suspension and revocations on application. There are some aggravating factors that there are numerous out-of-state violations. However, like I said, there was no violation in Tennessee that was found. And then the recommendation is to send a letter of warning. Do I have a motion?
A motion to.
Rick Thompson, I make the motion.
It's Brian Tibbs, I second.
Are there any questions?
Hearing no other questions, Mr. Blair Parker.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Ricky Bursai.
Yeah.
Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Ballard Gribble. Rick Thompson.
Yes.
Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Kathy Ware.
Yes.
Alton Heathcote.
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. We're on number 15.
And these are the representations. Number 15 is 20190700601. The previous recommendation was to authorize a civil penalty of $3,000, which comprises $1,000 each for says 2 unauthorized revisions of the plans by a non-registrant and for not submitting a response to the board. The board decided to authorize a civil penalty of $5,000. When we looked at this, the respondent is not a registrant, so according to the rules, they cannot be penalized for not responding to the board. The respondent also says he was told by the owner that he paid the engineer $2,000 for drawings, so it was okay to make the revisions. So what we were wanting to do to keep this more consistent is to authorize a civil penalty of $2,250, which comprises $750 for each sheet that incorrectly used the original professional engineer stamp by the respondent. Have a motion?
This is Rick Thompson. I make the motion.
This is Susan Ballard. I second.
Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, Stuart, I've got a quick question. Is there any culpability on the owner's part for distributing those plans?
I don't believe that there's any liability on the owner in this.
This is Kathy. I'm just curious as to why. Why does he not have liability? He's the one who instructed someone to violate the rules.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. We're having a lot of feedback.
Stuart, you want me to respond a little bit?
Yes.
I think this was the case. The respondent is a fire alarm contractor, and he was putting shop drawings together for permitting, and that's when this came up that he took 3 sheets that had the engineer's stamp on it and made changes to it and presented that as the shop drawings that had to be approved by the local code authorities. And so I don't think the owner was the one directing the action in that. I think he hired the contractor to get the work done. And I don't think we normally reach up to the owner level when they're dependent on a professional. And so I thought this was pretty clear that the fire alarm contractor just didn't know the rules, didn't scrub the engineer's seals off of the 3 sheets, and the engineer didn't know about it. And so I thought it was a pretty clear 3 sheets at $750 a sheet.
That's fine. I accept that as an explanation. I was just looking for something that would help me better understand the owner's position on that. Thank you, Ricky.
And are we ready for a vote?
Absolutely. We have a motion by Mr. Rick Thompson, a second by Ms. Susan Ballard Gribble. To go through roll call, Mr. Blair Parker,
Yes.
Brian Tibbs,
Yes.
Bursine, Robert Campbell,
Yeah.
Susan Ballard Gribble,
Yes.
Rick Thompson,
Yes.
Frank Wagster,
Yes.
Kathy Ware,
Yes.
Colton Heathcote,
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you, board members. We're on number 16.
All right. Selena, are you on?
Yes, I am. Good morning. This is Shalina Brown. I have the representations of cases number 16 and 17, and those complaint numbers are 2019-055-791, and the companion case, which has these pretty much the same set of facts, is 2019-055-801. These two complaints, previously the board had decided to put them in litigation monitoring. They involved allegations of fraud, dishonesty, and theft. It was found that there was no evidence of any of these allegations. There was a pending lawsuit, and that lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. There was no evidence, and the complainant also has submitted a request or a letter requesting dismissal of the complaints, both of them. And my recommendation is to close.
This is from, I'd like to move that we accept the recommendation of legal counsel.
This is Kathy. I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Roxana?
Thank you. And I have a quick question. I believe we have a motion by Mr. Frank Waxter. Was that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And a second by Kathy Ware. Do both these motions, since the cases are the same, Shalina, are they the motions and the second for both cases, 16 and 17?
Yes.
So I will take roll call.
Roxana, before you do quick, what does it mean to be dismissed with prejudice? Robert, sorry.
Thank you.
That they can't be brought again.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
Very good question, Robert. Thank you. We have a motion and a second for both cases 16 and 17. I will go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker?
Yes.
Brian Tibbs?
Yes.
Bursai?
Yes.
Robert Campbell?
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Frank Waxter?
Yes.
Kathy Ware? Alton Heathcote?
Yes, ma'am.
King?
Yes.
Thank you, board members. We're on our last case, number 18, and this one had a slight modification, so you did all receive the updated version as well. I'll turn it over to Stuart or Shalina, whoever's doing that case. Thank you.
And number 18 is 2019-06541. There was a modification on the new recommendation. The new information on this was a very convoluted matter. And the reviewing board member was Ricky Bursai, and I'm sure he will agree. But what we have here is an alarm systems contractor used an architect's stamp. It was a copy of the architect's stamp. So we have a copy of that, and the new recommendation is to authorize a civil penalty of $1,000 for using another architect's seal without permission, because this was previously in a monitoring status until we could look into this further. And we didn't actually receive any new information from the complainant or the respondent. Do I have a motion?
Rick Thompson, I make the motion.
It's Frank Waxter. I'll second the motion.
Are there any questions or discussion? Okay, Roxana?
Thank you. Wrapping up the legal report, Mr. Blair Parker?
Yes.
Brian Tibbs?
Yes.
Bursai?
Yes.
Robert Campbell?
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Frank Waxter?
Yes.
Kathy Ware?
Yes.
Alton Heathcote?
Yes, ma'am.
Stephen King?
Yes.
Thank you, Stuart, Shalina, and board members. We've gone through the legal report. The last item on our agenda that is associated with legal, I will turn over to Maria to do an update on the legislative piece we have going on. And if the board members now or after this need a 5-minute break, even though we're telephonic, if you need to get something to drink, water, stretch your legs, let me know and we can always resume. If not, we will continue. I'll leave that at your discretion. Maria?
Excuse me, Roxanne.
Thank you,
That's
Roxana.
great. This is Kathy. May I ask one question?
Absolutely.
I made reference yesterday in our engineering committee meeting to an informal conference call that I was part of back in, I want to say April. I can't remember exactly. Stuart was part of that, and I was just wondering if we were representing that particular issue or what the status was on that gentleman's, the complaint that was entered against him. We originally told him that we would welcome him to appear at the June board meeting to reconsider his case. So Stuart, if you could answer that for me, I appreciate it.
And Stuart, you're welcome to, or if you want me to add, but I'll turn it over to you.
I don't mind you adding whatever, but it will be represented in August.
Thank you. That's all I needed to know. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy. Maria, it's all yours.
Thank you, Roxana. So as you all know, the session was had to take a pause because of our pandemic. So I know last meeting back, I think it was February, we had some controversial bills. Some of those have been taken off notice. The only significant update I have for you all right now is that the sunset bill, that was Senate Bill 1652, to extend this board until June 30th, 2026. It was signed by the governor on March 19th and became effective as of March 19th. So I'm just going to be keeping an eye. I might have more updates for you all at our next meeting as to some of these other bills, but that is all I have right now.
Thank you very much, Maria. Any questions regarding that, board members? I appreciate your update. And hopefully by August, things as far as other legislation or proposed rules will get back on track. So
Yes, and also, Roxana, I don't know if this is, we wanted to talk about this under the continuing education piece, but we do need to talk about the proposed rule that we had in the works. So I can either talk about that right now, or we can wait until we just talk about continuing education as a whole.
If you could do that now, just because it is kind of rulemaking and legislative related more so. Yeah, that sounds great. I'll mute myself again. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I know we all had hopes of getting the continuing education rule moving, and that it was anticipated we would have rulemaking hearing to make those significant changes. As you all know, there had been feedback from associations and some confusion. So I had paused moving forward. Rulemakings were paused as well. However, I just kind of wanted to touch base with the board, and it's my recommendation that we table this change right now. I think it's going to cause mass confusion among licensees to do something like this right now, especially if there are talks about continuing education generally, and just being able to get that as the rule stands. Some welcoming feedback from you all, but that's just my recommendation. I don't think we should shake things up any more than they have been due to recent circumstances. So any comments or questions?
This is Rick Thompson. I had a call yesterday from, well, let me ask a question first. Did we receive a letter from AIA in regard to the this subject?
So I had talked a little bit with Ashley. I haven't received a letter yet. Maybe that was the memo that she had mentioned earlier in the call.
Okay.
I have not received a letter or memo yet.
Well, if I could speak to that just briefly, I would like to. Just as a courtesy to the board, the president of the AIA called me yesterday and just said that they were sending, he said a letter, but a memo, whatever it is, just they are confused about the intent of what we're trying to do for the architects. And I basically repeated what we had said in the meetings previously, which is public record, is that we were trying to get more in line with NCARB and the other states. And we talked a little bit about just the surface related items. And he told me that they weren't in objection to what we were trying to do. He's just said there are some members that are confused. I don't really know how we make it a whole lot clearer than we have if they're not going to attend the meetings or read the minutes or do the things that need to be done, other than to say, well, I just don't like that. That's not how we've always done it. So I don't object to tabling it for a little while, but it just seems to never get any legs, because I ask, is there a percentage of the registrants who have voiced this opinion? He said, well, I really don't know. And, you know, is it 3%? Is it 5%? What is it that why we keep getting this pushback from some of the members? And if it's a huge amount of members versus a small amount of members, you know, I think that needs to have some weight as we move forward in our deliberations here. And it really, the carryover issue does not matter to anybody but the state of Tennessee, because all the other states, with the exception of a couple, do not allow carryover. The president of the AIA said, I'm all for going to the calendar year. He said, but we're just confused about this carryover. People just, you know, in the event they forget for a couple of years and they need a couple of hours. Well, then, and the whole purpose and the reason that I have talked about this for the last 3 years is to try to get in line so that your national licensure is not affected negatively. And if you're licensed in Iowa or wherever, that's just an example, and they have the calendar year, and you don't meet that calendar year, you get a charge filed against you, a complaint that goes everywhere that has that reciprocal rule. The point that I'm making is that this is for the benefit of the profession, and we're not picking on the few that aren't licensed in other states. So, you know, it's just frustrating from a board perspective that, you know, we keep getting this feedback because your officers change every year in AIA, and it's never ending. And I'm a member of AIA, and you know, that's most of us typically are if you're licensed in other states anyway. But it's just troublesome that we continue to have this problem moving forward with either vote it up or vote it down. You know, I'm just giving you my frustration here and my knowledge of what I think is going to occur in that memo or that letter based on my very brief discussion with the president of the AIA yesterday. So that's what I have. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I definitely hear your frustration, and I think one of my concerns with proceeding for a rulemaking hearing electronically at this meeting was just that I'm not sure timeline-wise because there are several steps and offices that have to approve this rule, that it would be able to be approved in time to where our years would match up, and especially wanted to have an appropriate forum for people for the public and those who have comments and concerns on it. So hopefully we'll be together at our next meeting. If not, that might be something we can discuss to move forward on it. Is there any other comments from board members on this?
This is Robert Campbell. I agree with what Rick's saying. I mean, if we need to go to August because we have an in-face meeting, I think that's probably got some wisdom to it. But then if August doesn't have an in-face meeting and we don't do, there's some point where we've got to do this. So I would like to have a commitment that we do something in August and get this thing going, because ultimately, I agree with Rick. You have a few people either that don't pay attention or whatever the circumstance is, that I would be surprised if you've got a lot of people that are disagreeing with trying to sync up your PDH hours if you're registered in more than one state. That doesn't seem logical to me.
Yeah, I agree that we should be lining up, and I'm your attorney for the board, and I will do what you all ask. I just want one point I would like to point out is that I think the elimination of carryover is going to be viewed as not overly burdensome, but burdensome at a time where some licensees are saying carryovers. I mean, PDH is not as easy to get. So is there any feedback, or I just want to have the full picture of everything and have a good grasp on your all's perception of that piece of it.
This is Rick again. We have talked about this, about having a rollover period or a period of 2 years or 3 years to roll that old system out and the new system in. And again, this particular part of this has been discussed for 3 years. When it got lost in the shuffle, it was ready to go forward, and we were going to allow people to use the rollover hours for 2 years or 3 years. And I don't remember, Frank, you may know. And I'm not saying we're not going to do that. What I'm saying is that for what I was told from the AIA is they are not going to actively oppose this. They are just bringing it to our attention that there are some members who don't like it. No one's taking anything away from anybody. Given the current situation, I understand. But 3 years ago, we didn't have that situation, but we still have the same circumstances. So if we're going to think about doing something, and I appreciate Robert saying let's try to do something in August if we can, I think we should come to the realization that there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like something. Now, again, is that 90% of the profession, or is that 3% of the profession? So, we're not restricting someone's ability to practice architecture. If we're going to have a rollout in 3 years, get with the program and do what you're supposed to do. Keep up with your hours, and do that. Step up and do that professionally. So that's my point. We're not taking anyone's ability to practice architecture away from them. We are merely asking the architects to get in alignment with what's going on in the nation. So, I hear that argument, and it just does not make sense to me, other than, oh my goodness, you're taking away my ability to practice. That's not the case. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Frank. I agree with Rick 100% on this. And yeah, I think it was 2 years, and then when that didn't get passed, we were changing the date, so it's still 2 years from when we originally tried to get it passed. And there's no reason that I can think of that somebody would have. Maybe these people that object to this, maybe they can give us a reason. Even when reviewing their CEUs, where they're randomly chosen, I don't even remember seeing anybody using carryover hours. So I'm not sure what all of this is about, other than one or two people want to complain about anything.
Yeah. This is Ricky. Just some input from our engineer committee meeting yesterday. Not just on my personal observation is the opportunity for free continuing education hours has exploded since COVID-19 hit. Every day I've got 3 or 4 things in my inbox that are free continuing education opportunities, and Tennessee does not limit that. Tennessee does not have pre-approved courses that you have to take, so it's very easy to get hours, even if conventions have been postponed. The other thing we mentioned is that there are some states that kind of advertise that sitting in, like Florida, sitting in and listening to the AE board meetings can be used for continuing education, and we all thought that was that there's probably nothing better for health, safety, welfare than for the registrants to hear what happens at our board meetings. So, and that's a lot of hours right there that are available for free and pretty convenient. So anyway, we had talked about that being a potential thing we could publicize and put in the newsletter. So I agree with what Rick is saying.
Thank you. So I'll work on getting a rulemaking hearing scheduled for the August meeting. Is there anything else that anyone would like to comment on before we move forward to the next agenda item?
How about that 5-minute break now?
That sounds very doable. Thank you. I think that'll be a great thing. So I've got us at 11:07. If you will all make sure that you're on mute when we take a 5-minute break, we'll come back. I'll make sure everybody is back on so we have quorum in 5 minutes. Thank you, board members, and we'll continue with the director's report, starting with the grant items. Thank you. Okay, thank you, board members. We're going to continue. Please stop me as we go through each of the sections. A couple of these items we've already touched on, so I don't want to keep you longer than needed. We are starting with the conversation just briefly again regarding the grant amendments. As mentioned when we were approving the March 30th teleconference meeting that was held, we have 4 universities that have been given amendment contracts. That's UT Knoxville, University of Memphis, Tennessee Tech, and Christian Brothers University. They proposed using the funds that had already been approved and distributed. They needed to use them for other purposes than the original request due to COVID-19, and they proposed some wonderful options in assistance toward COVID-19, everything from working on face masks using 3D printers, bringing students on to use some additional technology, again, all in these efforts. So those amended contracts have gone out, and with them, we've extended the time for them to spend those funds until the end of the year. So that's just a quick update, but very much in line still with the conversation about our grants. The 2021 period, as the board is aware, kind of starts at this meeting. It's when we look at the letters that are being sent out to all the different universities, and that's the first piece I do want us to talk about, and I'm so grateful Susan is with us to get her insight as well. We're more looking for guidance on how the board wants to proceed. And so with the universities reaching out to us immediately, and as you all know, schools actually closing, sending students home, and doing now virtual, distance learning, online learning, whatever the universities have been able to do. A lot of the administrative offices have changed their processes. Individuals may be working from home, but harder to reach, and we've definitely found that. I have 3 universities, no 4, 3 universities, I apologize, that have not cashed the checks from February that are issued, those February and March checks that go out, and we've never had that happen before. So between Michael and I, will be reaching them now. And I just think, I mean, that's an example of not everyone in the office, right? Different things that are impacted by people not there in processes. So my thought was to not hurry up and send those proposal letters the middle of June like we've had the last 2 years that I've done them, but delay them a little bit at least to make sure that the universities are going to get them and that we're sensitive to their time constraints. Their priorities have been the students and figuring out what their new normal is. So with that, I welcome the thought of a date if we want to send them out maybe by the middle to end of July. We are planning on emailing them. That's what I did last year. If you all recall, last year we had to give them extra time because that's when we did the change so that a portion of their request went toward students' benefits directly and directly impacted the students themselves. So we could follow those timelines and they worked last year. I know that the grant committee had less time to review everything, which I hate to do that. But given the situation and the other fires that the university are putting out and student demands, I just don't know that, we want to push them with our piece as well, if we can give them some extra latitude. So I welcome that conversation. Michael will be running with those letters. We've got them ready to go. We're going to email them. So the question is, when do we want their proposals returned so that the grant committee has some time to review those proposals? And if you do want them for the August meeting, then that again limits their time. Or could we have them come in with enough time for October?
Roxana, this is Susan. I'd like to propose maybe a different time schedule. To me, because they are not at school per se, but are working from home, they probably need more time to complete their applications and get feedback from their faculty. It's not like they're getting together as they normally would and discussing, resource needs. So my recommendation would be to go ahead and send them out this month, but give them a little more time to reply to us, let's say mid-September to late September, and give us at least 2 weeks to read through them. It's usually anywhere from 150 to 200 pages, and 1 year I had over 300 pages. So it's a lot of information, and this year is not normal in any circumstances, I know, but I really feel like they probably need more time to pull it together, to find a more creative way to give the students the benefits. And I don't know how the colleges are handling things in the Nashville area, but they are discussing how they're going to reopen in Knoxville at UT. And I'm sure they are everywhere. So we don't know what that's going to be like. And I think we may need to look at their proposals this year as being a little bit different, because it may be they need to buy more equipment as opposed to sending a student abroad to study. So I think this is going to be the year of exceptions in general. And if we can give them more time, I think that's to their advantage. And then, I'm sure they're going to have questions, and we may need to be able to address those throughout the summer and help them to figure out how to use their funds. So that's just my input.
Thank you, Susan. I love that. I love the idea of us getting them out sooner. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we can do those with a due date of either Friday, September 11th or the 18th. That would give our board members or the committee at least 2 weeks to read those documents. Of course, once they get the letter from us, we are always available, and this will be a new experience for Michael, as it was the first year that I did him, so I'm happy to help him. Wanda has also learned a lot of these moving pieces. So between the three of us and our contracts folks, we are always available to answer their questions. I'm sure we'll start getting calls and questions and emails and what about this suggestion. So it gives us more time. I like that. I think it was, my concern was trying to get it to you all for the August meeting. So it sounds like we're agreeing that they need more time. Any other grant committee members or board members with ideas before we set this up?
Roxana, this is Alton, and I support everything that Susan said. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Alton. If there are any other board members that have concerns with the dates, I think we are in good shape. This is what I was looking for. Between Michael and I, we'll get the letters out in the next 2 weeks for sure. The date then for them to turn everything back to us will be September 11th, which is a Friday. We're going to email the letters. That'll start our process and definitely start them reaching us. I'm also going to reach out to the 3 universities directly, and to the 3 universities that haven't cashed the check, and kind of follow up on those pieces. But otherwise, you are correct, Susan. I agree with you. It's going to be a unique year, and I think our contract folks are aware of that we just want the universities, the students, and ultimately, as they become professionals, these projects to make sense and really help them long term. So that is exactly what I was looking for. I can't thank you enough.
So one other thing, Roxana, since everybody's here, I can't be more proud of our schools and our students for stepping up and using our 3D printer resources to help with the COVID. And I was just overwhelmed with joy that our board had been able to make a contribution in that way. And when the finance department wants to know why we're spending this money, I think we can look back and say that we were able to make a contribution as a profession and as a board to help our country in this crisis. And our students stepped up to the plate. So that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. That is fantastic. And we in the office, of course, shared that with our commissioner, deputy commissioner, with everyone. It was amazing news, and just really great to have positive things happen at a time that everyone needed them. And I commend you all as the board for starting this grant process, continuing working as hard as you do on it. It's fantastic. The additional $50,000, bringing the grant funds to be distributed from $350,000 to $400,000. That is moving. I don't know what I don't have the budget for the 2021 fiscal year, so I can't guarantee you that I see it on there. It's possible that it is. The finance pieces have separate due dates, if you will, so I'm not 100% certain it made it, but it's definitely past all the loops that it had to jump, and is going to happen. Whether it's for 2021 or not, I'll keep you all posted. But again, thank you all. This was a very good and positive note at a time we needed it. So it's sticking with the grants a little bit. Let's talk about the October meeting. The October meeting is our 3-day, meeting with all the different topics, all the different committees that need to have the conversations. I know that while Jennifer was here, you all had discussed and decided that it would be held in Memphis. Obviously, due to COVID-19 and all the changes going on, the universities probably don't want us in the middle of that as they're figuring out their new normal. And we also haven't been able to communicate with them. So I would encourage us to go ahead and just one more time come back to holding it in Nashville, also because the building by then, as Toby explained, should be set up in a way that, although we all hope to be at a great place with COVID-19, if distancing is still an issue and if we're still having to monitor temperature when you come in the building, we will be set up for that and can handle it. So at the August meeting, you all will make final decisions for that 3-day meeting. But at least I want to go ahead and note and make sure that you would be all okay with us moving forward with having it in Nashville, planning on the lunch as we've done in the past in Nashville. And then in the communication we're going to have that'll start here in the next couple of weeks with the universities, letting them know that in October they are welcome to come to the October meeting and that there'll be follow-up information. But I also want to present the thought that they might be able to call in. I know the importance of us being in person in meetings. I think we all agree that that has a benefit that can't be overlooked. And for the universities, in many cases, I think they will still want to come in person, but I would like to offer the option that if they have health concerns or limited budgets for travel, and we haven't touched a lot on budget cuts, but they're going to happen. So I want us to be okay with knowing that some of the universities might prefer to call in, and if we're in the building, we can definitely use the projector to have them show their equipment, show the project, whatever the board wants to see. But I don't know that we can expect them all to make the trip given the situation. So I'll turn that over to you all for 2 pieces. 1, having the meeting in Nashville, and then 2, how are we going to handle the presentations regarding the grants?
Roxana, this is Susan. I think offering the opportunity for them to do a Zoom or WebEx, whatever the state wants to provide, is probably a good idea. Knowing that revenues are down and resources are tighter, I think they might even appreciate it more because the time travel from outside of the Nashville area eats into their daily schedule. And so I think they would probably welcome it. But I'd hope that everyone would be able to see the presentations. And Dustin, that's your field, not mine. So hopefully we could get that worked out. And I think that would be a very positive thing, that they could still have that opportunity to learn from each other and make their presentations at the same time.
Yeah, I'd have to obviously run some things by IT, but that's definitely something we can look into, and I do think it would be possible.
Fantastic. Dustin, thank you for that feedback. And thank you, Susan. That's what I was hoping for. I agree with you. I think the universities are going to welcome that, appreciate that greatly, and still meet the requirement, the need for us to see the success from the students, the participation. And so Michael and I will look at that in the letters that go out to give them that information ahead of time so they don't panic at the thought of having to spend the money and the time to get to the meeting in October. So I think that'll all be a great thing. I'm excited, and we'll start moving on that 3-day meeting organization plan as the dates come closer, and we'll definitely get those letters out to the grants with us to the universities regarding the grants and the October meeting as quickly as possible. And that is what I've got on those 2 topics, unless anyone has any other questions. Yes.
I had a comment.
Yes.
I yield. This is Alton. I yield the floor. But I do have a question I'd like to follow up with.
Absolutely. Mr. Blair Parker, I think you're on the floor.
Thank you. I'm certainly fine to shift this back to Nashville, and all of this makes good solid sense to me. I really like these presentations, but we've noted in the past that some people come with just a standard dog and pony show. My concern is that when we do this via WebEx or whatever electronic form, they're just going to take a PowerPoint presentation that they prepared that's, it's going to take 20 minutes. So I think that we need to be very specific on how much time they have and have a mechanism to deal with that if people tend to get out of control. And I'm not meaning to be hard on this, but we can spend all day going through all the presentations easily. And they're all worthy, but just my thought. I'll mute myself.
Yeah, Blair, thank you for that comment. And again, we have this is Alton, I apologize. We have really kind of a limited amount of time with the upper echelon representatives from the universities. And some of the more valuable time that we spend with them is the interaction when we're talking to them about their programs and curriculum and challenges and things like how do you introduce grammar and public presentation and promotion of licensure and things like that. And while again I'm on the grants committee and I love the notion that these students are doing creative, innovative things and making these presentations, I always enjoy that. I can get a lot of that from reading what they do. I'd rather spend our time with the deans and the executives in the universities talking a little more specifically about how we can do things to promote licensure and what impediments they have to getting there. Thank you.
This is Susan. Roxana, on the special grants committee, we extended some additional funds to UT Chattanooga, and we are due a report back from them. So they need to follow up with that in October. We've not been able to follow up with them this spring. So I just wanted you to add that to the list of things to ask the special grants team, okay?
Absolutely. And they may be one of those that choose to come in person because their item is so unique, right? But
right.
I agree that we'll give everyone that option. Thank you, Blair, for suggesting that we will limit it, and I have in the past. The downside, of course, is it's really hard to cut a university or a dean off when they're presenting things, but we may reiterate that this will be a unique time and that many of their colleagues will be doing it electronically. Therefore, they definitely are limited in time, and hopefully they'll share really important things instead of just numbers on the university. So we may, Michael will use his wisdom and experience also in trying to figure out how we best craft that to get to the good stuff, if you will, on what is really happening with the students. So I think those are great points, and we will move with that. If again, the big item that I know you all enjoyed and the deans was the lunch together and the camaraderie and the conversations. Some of that will be lost for those that aren't coming in. It's just a sign of the times, but I know they'll all look at those options as they come in. And I love the fact that even on the year we don't discuss the universities and the grants, they still came in. So many of them came to talk to you all. So that's a clear indication that they too really benefit from that and like that. So thank you all. I think that covers that particular topic. Next on our agendas, we wanted to discuss the expedited licensure that took place in March for the engineering committee members. I apologize, you already heard some of this, but to the other members, this will likely be new. This had to do, of course, with the March storms that hit our state on March the 3rd. And due to those storms, our Governor Lee released Executive Order number 13. That order was to specifically address the needs that resulted from the storms, the request to step up, if you will, and make sure that people that are wanting to help are licensed and are rushed and expedited, and that we basically look at everything just to try to help our true victims of these storms. And so with that in mind, I was able to communicate with Ricky Bursai on the engineering side, and then Brian Tibbs, who happened to be at a conference. And thank you, Brian, for putting things aside and you and I connecting so quickly. So we very quickly discussed how do we expedite our licensees that are wanting to come and help with the storm. And I thought we'd only licensed about 10. I got a better updated number yesterday from Cindy. We've put 15 engineers through. The engineers were mostly structural, maybe exclusively structural engineers that came in with one or two firms, and what we called an expedited license still met all of our licensure requirements. We just put everything else we do aside and tried to rush them to get them into the state helping in what was needed. And so it was a joint effort, but Cindy literally dropped everything else to push these along. And because they were the engineers impacted, our engineering members would get the notice that I had reviewed everything and approved it, and we would get them licensed quicker. The first one still took about 3 weeks because we didn't have all those pieces moving, and that individual had already contacted NCWS to send us things. But by the second one, we were able to license most of them in less than a day and a half at the most. So I just want to share that because our state has gone through so much, our country has gone through so much, and we still are. But at least in what this board could do to help with the storm damages, you all really stepped up, and our licensees really appreciated it. Licensing someone in a day is close to impossible for this industry. That's exactly the case. And these were model law applicants. So we had all their records, their education, they met everything. What we were able to work around was the fee. We were able to waive it, and I think we waived it on 4 engineers at the most. And then separately, we were able to go pull the reports we needed instead of waiting on them to come to us. So, and the references, instead of the 5 that normally we need, we again, checking with Mr. Bursai and Tibbs, we agreed that 3, as long as they were good references and on the records, we could use. And of course, our model law applicants already have 5 on the record. They just might not be current. So that's really a quick update for those that didn't know. If you have any questions, I will definitely pause and I'm happy to take those. I don't imagine we'll be getting many more. I think the last one I saw was a couple of weeks ago. Okay, we will go on. And this particular, the next topic is on our CE concerns. We have touched on that. I didn't want to lose Maria during the legislative piece and thought it was well worth discussing the rulemaking piece. And so we did touch again on the CE concern that is addressed here. And I know Ricky brought up what we discussed yesterday. So I'm not going to reiterate all that. I'm going to focus then on what Ricky brought up, which is that at the architect and at the engineering committee meeting yesterday, we discussed conversations with Casey Anderson regarding our licensees and options that they might miss out on due to COVID-19. And I did share with the engineering committee that many of our professions have been hit hard by not having in-person sessions. The architect, engineer, landscape architect, interior designers, they have not been, this program has not been one that's been reaching us with that panic. I need to renew at the end of the month and I can't have a session. I can't find a session that's online or virtual. So we felt very blessed that they didn't reach us with that request. What do we do? And the answer would have been, we can extend that. We can still license you, and we had an order that gave us that permission. And then we will give you an extension of 60 days after things are cleared up, and that means stay-at-home orders lifted, that kind of thing. And you'll still be able to practice. You don't meet that requirement but it's due to this unforeseen situation. So in other industries, we had to do that and keep a running list and so forth. We did not for the architects and engineers. So that's the good note. But in those conversations, as Ashley pointed out, and as we discussed, the topic of allowing our licensees to watch and participate the board meetings and get credit for those came up, and it's the first time we've had the conversation. It is a wonderful conversation. I've reviewed it with Maria, so if we've missed something, she could flag us. The statute allows you to do that. In other words, give PDH hours for attendance in the meeting. Our licensees would keep track of what they're attending. We don't need them to fill out any special form. That would just slow down the process. And as we previously mentioned, the continuing education courses are vast and we don't approve them anyway. So this would fall in line. And on the record, when the meetings end, the chair would state how many PDH hours are acceptable for that meeting. So in this case, when we end, if the board votes to do this, and we will need a motion because it's a change in what we do, Mr. Blair Parker would at the end accept a motion of how many hours we will give. And obviously we've been on the record since 9 o'clock already. If we think that all 2 hours or 2.5 wouldn't be worthy of the credit, that will be at your discretion, not the directors or legal. And on the record, you'll say how many hours are acceptable. Our licensees hopefully have been watching, whether live or on the recorded one, either one. And then they would keep that as their record of continuing education. We do this already with land surveyors. Land surveyors end each meeting. If you want to watch and skip to the end with the chair saying how many PDH hours will we give our licensees that are been viewing, and they say 2 hours or 3, whatever it may be. They deduct the lunch because they break for lunch and then come back. You all don't. We normally go straight through. So it will be at your discretion, and it's a clear item. It's clearly on the record. Also, knowing that more are watching and participating electronically on the conversations, are very cognizant of that organizations are watching, and it is a large number within the land surveyor community that use meeting hours as part of their credits. And as Casey Anderson said, a lot of important business and items and new items and questions and debates happen during these board meetings. So Maria and I have no problem with this. We can start as of this meeting. I welcome any other questions from the board members. And then if everyone's in agreement, we do need a motion to proceed.
Roxanna, I've got a thought on this. I think our rules, when you look in the rules for board members, counting their time on the board for continuing education, I think we're limited to 8 hours for a licensing period, a renewal period. So I don't know whether we want to put any kind of limit on how many hours of the board meetings they might be able to count, but just wanted to toss it out there to see what people thought about that.
That's a great point. point. Thank you, Ricky.
Roxana, this is Frank. I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
It kind of relates to what Rick was saying earlier about being registered in other states. I'm assuming the credit hours that we're talking about for viewing our board meetings or taking part in them, I guess, that would not be hours that you could use in another state. Is that correct?
That is correct, because we discuss our complaints. Like today, we had 18 and discussed them in length, potential rules in the pipeline. It would be their CE that they are accounting for and using only the hours from our meetings. I don't imagine any other state would let them do that, but we would only acknowledge those that they watch for our particular meetings. Does that answer your question, Frank?
Yeah, yes, it does. I was assuming that, but I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely.
Roxana, this is Rick. I agree that if they want to get some hours, that they should match ours, because we are going to be in those meetings. And like Frank said, they're not allowed in other states, but if we're accepting them in Tennessee, that's fine. That's great. One thing on a national level is AIA does not accept even our time that we are attending the NCARB seminars and at the meetings, and if that's not HSW, I don't know what is. But you know that AIA has a lot to do with how these other states accept the hours, and that might be something that the local AIA chapter could pursue with national to try to get those hours accepted. And if they are, then they can. If you're a member of AIA, you can obviously just turn your information in, and if not, you can register them yourself and get confirmation that they are acceptable through AIA. So there is a way to possibly utilize some of these hours, but you have to get AIA approved to get those in most states, if not all. So just as an editorial comment on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If we have no other item of conversation regarding this, because this is a change that we'll implement, we will, as Kathy had mentioned, and Ricky, I think as well, we'll put something in the newsletter that's going out. We'll make sure we have something on the website. We would need a motion to start accepting these hours if individuals wish to use them, right? Ricky pointed out that at least in his area and his specific engineering specialty, there's plenty of hours out there even for free. But for those that need them and want to count them, we would make this available.
Hey, Roxana, this is Robert. Before we vote,
yes,
is there on other PDHs, we have a certificate with a signed document. What would we require as I don't want to say proof, because that's going to be, I mean, what documentation would we require for this?
So to not complicate the process, I would envision, we don't require anything from the land surveyors, using them again in piggybacking. They are supposed to keep a log or track of their hours, just like many other professionals do, home inspectors and others. They keep certificates, and you're right, most of the organizations that you take a class for will give you a certificate, something signed, stamped, and you're to track them. So for the land surveyors that use theirs, they keep a log. They've created their own log. They keep it. It's perfectly fine. The minutes, of course, would be perfect as well, because at the end of the minutes, it will end with the chair acknowledged that 3 PDH hours are acceptable. So if we audited you and you decided you were taking a full 8 hours or 5 hours of PDHs from watching meeting minutes, what I would expect us to see from their record would be the meeting minutes that acknowledge how many hours were done, or a manual log that says I attended the August 3rd meeting, the June 4th meeting, and the December 5th, whatever date is. And that would suffice, given that we will always have record of how many hours were given. It's a little bit on the honor system.
Yeah, and I get that, and I reckon it is still a little inconsistent though with what we require for other PDHs, and I mean, this is not a slam at the surveyors or others, but I think we've got a system that we use that has some verification in it. What I mean, it almost seems like somebody that wants to go to the very end of the meeting and just say, okay, they put down 2 hours and then go and do that for 4 meetings and not have any documentation they ever attended the meeting. So that's the only thing that concerns me.
I don't know that we can ever, and if you all think of a way, let me know, but I don't know that we can ever assure that they attended or watched or listened to the meeting. So even if we did a certificate at the end of the minutes, for those of you that participated, print the certificate, again, it would be available to them to print. So I welcome other ideas. I just don't know what we would hand them.
Maybe you could say a little code, like different points in the meeting that they have to put on their certificate.
That's cute. Hey, this is Kathy. Robert, I know that's kind of, I had that concern when I was thinking about this as an option, but I also feel like we just need to put it out there as an option and maybe get more people to listen in, even if they claim 2 or 3 hours and they only have 5 minutes of engagement. That's 5 minutes than we had before. And maybe we could overcome some of these problems like what Rick was talking about recently about architects and continuing education and confusion. So you never know if people are watching videos either. They claim credit all the time for watching videos as continuing education, and they might just have them running in the background while they're working. So I don't think we can really police that, but maybe we could take a step forward and have a positive outcome from all this if we use this as an opportunity.
Yeah, this is Frank. I think one thing we might do is limit the number of meeting hours, like say a maximum of 4 of your CEU hours can be from the A&E board meeting.
Frank, this is Robert. I agree with that because, again, I could see a situation where somebody needed all 12 hours and they just went to the very end of every meeting and wrote down those minutes. And I think, Roxana, the only thing I would ask, I know we can't necessarily, but that somebody sign something, the individual that says, I listened to the board on whatever today is, June the 3rd, 4th, whatever, from these times to this time, and I'm claiming this many hours based on what I just think that sometimes when people have to sign something, that may cause them to think twice about just breezing through it. I mean, that's, because you possibly could, well, I don't reckon you could tell who's logged into your server though, and how long they've logged in if it ever became a question. I know that's some trouble, but it could happen. So anyway, that's my thought.
And I like that, Robert. When I mentioned the land surveyors, that is what their log looks like that they turn in. I, Robert Campbell, attest to the fact that I watched the video of the land surveyor meeting on these following dates from this time to this time. Therefore, I've obtained, and so their log has the dates and the times and at least some effort, right? When they use that to turn in and count for PDHs. So we could do this similarly. We're going to leave some flexibility for what their log looks like, but they need to attest to the fact that they watched or listened to on what date and how long, and then the total PDHs. So if that's in agreement with everyone, I like the fact that you want to limit the hours because we can put that in the motion as well. And then in the newsletter and everything else we give back. And then obviously our staff will be trained on it as individuals ask about it. And it's not in rule because nothing in rules keeping us from doing this, but it is definitely acceptable like all the other online courses they're watching. So this would be a new process. I think the organizations will love sharing this. Everyone that had heard it yesterday was very excited. So 4 hours is not a bad idea. I think Frank made that suggestion, and some expectation of the licensee attesting to the fact of the date they watched or listened to the meeting, and the length of time that they listened, and then the total PDHs they're claiming. And if a maximum of 4 hours is what you all decide, then we just need a motion, whether it's the 4 or full 8. Either one will work.
Roxana, one more thought regarding the whether this would count in other states. AIA is a little different. They're more organized in terms of continuing education being standard with AIA. Engineering is, I think, more fractured, and I don't think I could say for sure that these hours wouldn't count in other states, because I've seen that kind of thing on people's logs. So I think if we put this in a newsletter, that it would be good to say, if you're registered in other states, you need to check with those other states to see if these hours would count for continuing education, and leave it open like that. But I don't think we ought to say a blanket statement that they wouldn't count in other states.
I think that's great, Ricky. It makes sense. Yeah, we would never answer whether it will count or won't for any profession. It's just what you as board members have decided is acceptable to count in Tennessee.
You want me to go ahead and make a motion?
I would love that, Ricky. Thank you.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we publicize that we will count attendance at board meetings towards continuing education, and we'll limit it to 4 hours per renewal period, and there will be some sort of assigned certification of attendance.
Hey, Ricky, this is Alton. You meant Tennessee board meetings. Would we necessarily accept it from other states?
I think Tennessee, I think the intent was that this was Tennessee board meetings.
This is Rick. I'll second that emotion.
Wonderful. We have a motion from Ricky Bursai and a second from Mr. Rick Thompson. The motion is that we publicize somehow, and that's going to be through the newsletter. Our organizations are going to talk about it. We'll have it on the website, that our licensees can start counting attendance toward their C with a limit of 4 hours maximum in each renewal cycle, that they will be expected to provide a signed certification of some sort that has the date and time of attendance and the total PDH hours, again, not to exceed 4 hours. Is that accurate, Ricky? I'm sorry, Ricky, I didn't hear you. Did I say your motion accurately?
Yes, that sounded good to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we will do roll call vote on this motion to proceed. Mr. Blair Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Brian Tibbs?
Yes.
Ricky Bursai?
Yes.
Robert Campbell?
Yes.
Susan Ballard Gribble?
Yes.
Rick Thompson?
Yes.
Frank Wagster?
Yes.
Kathy Ware?
Yes.
Alton Heathcote?
Yes, ma'am.
And Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on, we have, or you have before you, we emailed the Word version of the newsletter. The intent, I'm thrilled that that's back. I know how important this was to you all. I know in this meeting, as we want to wrap up at some point, we can't necessarily finalize the newsletter. So my thought, but I welcome your suggestions, is everyone has it in Word version. If you don't, I'm happy to email it again. We know we want to add this piece about the CE that was just added. So I think Michael is going to run with this going forward. If you want to make any changes you see necessary, the look, remember, is going to change. Ultimately, General Services will finish the look, the product, and have it meet what the Tennessee logo needs to have on it, and that piece. So don't let the look concern you. They're going to line things up and do that piece. But you've got on the newsletter our new licensees, and we went back to the late 2017, the last newsletter that was published, even though we took a while longer to get it out until early 2018. But the information and the data was the final items you as board members had worked on with John Cothran. So we've added all the new licensees. Those that have deceased are also added there, and several topics, including at least one of the universities that worked on things for COVID-19. So that newsletter is in your hands. We welcome changes, ideas. I think individually you can even email Michael with your suggestions and updates, and so it'll be something he'll be running with. He has Morgan from our team also working on it. That was one of her strengths, so she ran with most of it. I mean, I literally barely touched it, and Wanda was great in making sure we had reports. So is that okay with the board that we handle the draft newsletter that way, in the hope that it can be finalized and go out the door definitely by the August meeting, would be my thought?
This is Susan. I do have a couple edits for it, so I can send those to you in an email. And I know I always send you all deaths of architects and engineers as I hear about them. There's also an interior designer that's not listed from last year, so I will send that information to you all. But I'm very happy to see this back again. I think it's very important.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, so we have a game plan, I think, for the newsletter, and I'm thrilled with that. Robert, I will turn it over to Mr. Campbell. This is regarding the local chapter of ASCE that asked you to speak on behalf of the board and update them. So you will need a motion if you're speaking on behalf of the board, but I also know that you want to give us an update of what it is you'll be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember exactly, but I've been asked by the local chapter of ASCE to do a video conference or video part. And basically, it's just to give them a board update, talk about items such as threats to licensure, what we see happening with maybe some of the legislative stuff that's been going on around that, and just kind of what the board is doing. So I've got some new things to tell them, but it's just like a lunch and learn thing that they've asked me to present to. So I needed your all's permission to represent the board in that discussion.
If you all don't have any questions, we'll need a motion, given that Robert is going to speak on behalf of the board. He'll also discuss decoupling master's degree. I think you have the definitions process and what we're looking at. And so if we could have a motion for Robert to proceed.
This is Brian. I'd like to move that Robert Campbell be allowed to speak at the local ASCE chapter.
This is Brian Tibbs. I second.
Thank you. We have a motion for Mr. Frank Waxter and a second for Mr. Brian Tibbs, giving Robert permission to speak on behalf of the full board at the ASCE local chapter. I will go through roll call. Mr. Blair Parker.
Yes.
Brian Tibbs.
Yes.
Ricky Bursai.
Yes.
Robert Campbell.
Yes.
Susan Ballard.
Yes.
Rick Thompson. Rick Thompson. Rick Thompson. Frank Wagster.
Yes.
Kathy Ware. Yes. Alton Heathcote.
Yes, ma'am.
And Stephen King.
Yes.
Thank you. We still have quorum, so we are good to go. On your iPad, not your iPads, I apologize, that's habit. On the presentation that I emailed to the board, you have the financial information. This is through March only. We hope to soon have the April and May numbers. So in June, you will be getting, I'm sorry, this is the June meeting. At the August meeting, you will possibly have that first draft of the full fiscal 2020 year. And as Toby touched on, our metrics were slightly impacted, not so much for A&E as other programs, but we're seeing everything get back to a new normal. So that I just want you to keep in mind. I think our finances, if you have questions, definitely let me know, but we can see on the last expense account items we have in March, the grants having been distributed. So that's the big number that you see that went out on those checks. We're still in line with I think where our reserves need to be. No reason for concern, but we have had a lot of cost back things that have come through, and I don't know if with changes in our new working from home schedule, hopefully in the next month or two, we'll see some reduction in expenses with that. During the month of March, on March 16th, we're all told to work from home. So between March 16th and, as Toby said, through the end of June, all of your team has been working from home, and thank goodness we'd made all the necessary changes way before then, because other than missing each other like we are right now, we all like seeing each other and sharing some of those things, at least from a work perspective and our health and that of our families and friends. It was very nice to know we could do everything still working from home. And we've been doing video conferencing, like many of you, using WebEx to see each other at least once a week. If nothing else, just to share funny things and concerns and connect. So if there are any questions regarding the financial piece, I welcome it. Otherwise, I will turn it over to the committee meetings for the reports, starting with the engineering one.
Hey, Roxana.
Yes, Ricky.
Back to the CE, the continuing education motion that we passed a bit ago. Chris Gwaltney pointed out on chat that we already, in our rules, under the continuing education chapter, allow a maximum of 8 PDHs per biennium to be claimed for attendance at board meetings and professional society, legislative events, and so forth. So it looks to me, looking at the rule, that we already allow 8 hours if somebody wanted to attend board meetings. So thought we ought to bring that up since Chris pointed it out. Thank you, Chris. Is it our intent to change the rule that's in there?
This is Maria. I just want to clarify one point on that. The maximum of 8 applies to people who are attending those as an officer or committee member. So if you're an acting in capacity, as your official role, that's limited to 8. So if you want to match that for licensees who are not participating as members, to match, the 8, that's fine. But you can stick with the 4 and still be within the parameters of the rule.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. That was the thought. So, so I think we're leaving it alone. Is that okay with you, Ricky? Fantastic. Okay. If there are no questions regarding the finances, the game plan, and any of those budget items, and we will present numbers and updates at the August meeting. Michael will run with those as well. I'm happy to turn it over to Alton Heathcote for the engineering committee update.
Great. I'll try to do this in less than an hour.
Thank you.
I think I've got 7 items on my agenda, 2 of which have already been discussed. So I'll just briefly mention them. One is the information that Casey provided about getting CEUs during COVID-19. I won't revisit that. We've already discussed it. The second item, Roxana, was the information that you had provided on the expedited licensures. So I won't mention that again. We've reviewed and made recommendations on 4 applications for which whoever the reviewing entities were had either questions or issues that requested additional feedback. We also reviewed and discussed a parallel issue which we deferred to legal for investigation to determine whether or not a complaint should be opened about somebody calling themselves an engineer as a reference. And we didn't know whether this individual may be exempted under our rules and regulations or not, but he used the moniker engineer anyway. Second, we approved giving authorization of the location and accommodations for the 2022 NCAAS Joint Central Zone meeting. We deliberated over a request that was made by a structural engineering firm. And they asked that we provide an opinion and help them understand what the process was for entering a complaint. And their issue was related to a firm that outsourced a significant amount of their production and design to, for lack of a better word, remote locations. I think in this particular instance, it was to an organization in India where, this firm wakes up in the morning, they go to work, do what they do, and then they ship the information they provided that day to this firm in India who works on it while all of the people in the United States are sleeping. And then when the people in the United States come back to work the next morning, they open it up to see what's been completed in either the drafting and or design. We asked that the staff forward info in rule section 0120-02-.08 related to sealing and registering drawings and any other rules that might apply, and that we educate them on the process for submitting a complaint if that's what their orientation is in this. We also asked the staff to invite them to attend the next engineering committee meeting to discuss this issue openly, because we know that there are a number of firms now that outsource just like this. And I don't recall a situation where we have policed that in the past. I've been to the board. Another item we had is that it was via Kathy, and it was a really good idea. She had an individual vehemently concerned that a complaint had been entered against them, but they never received the complaint, and therefore they had no chance to respond. So we asked that the staff ensure that there's a clearly defined process to send out notifications of complaints that are received or supposed to be received by respondents when a complaint's been issued against them. And the last thing that I have from the meeting yesterday is that, or maybe the first time I know about anyway, that the NCAAS annual meeting is scheduled for August. It's still scheduled for August, but instead of going to Chicago, it's going to be conducted remotely. Therefore, there will be no travel required, and we've saved the state of Tennessee a lot of money. Does anybody have any additions to that or questions about it? If not, thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Blair. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Alton. That was wonderful. I think you covered it from beginning to end. All the details are there. If anyone has any questions or follow-up, know that you can always email me after the meeting if we need to do anything else. And I think, Alton, you were going to send me that information about the organization that wants to kind of come to our August meeting. So if you'll just send me that email so I make sure I don't lose that. That's the only thing I've got pending. The architect committee did not meet. However, I had sent a document on one applicant for our 3 members to review. And I know Wanda's still with us. Just checking back, since we didn't need to have the separate committee meeting on one item. This is regarding Mr. Canuto de Leon. Rick, Brian, or Frank, I'll turn it over to you. This is regarding a request to extend the testing time because he has yet to pass the exams. Any conversations or a motion for him to continue?
Roxana, this is Frank. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with what you're referring to.
Brian or Rick, have either of you had a chance to look at those documents?
I have to admit, unfortunately, no. I just pulled it up. I apologize. I lost that email. I was probably get behind on Emily's too, but I apologize for that.
No worries. And this was relatively recent, so we figured since we had a board meeting, we could do this. But what we'll do, if it's okay with our three architects, is we'll make sure that Emily's document with his request gets emailed to you and blind copies each other just for your concerns. And if individually, you can let us know how you'd like to proceed. We're happy then to follow up with him. It just happened to come at the time of the meeting, and so we thought we'd send it out and try to get it resolved. So we will follow up on that. And that is all that I have. I apologize that we've not called out on Chris if he's got anything else before we adjourn that he wants to share with us or add. So I'll mute myself, and otherwise I'll turn it over to Mr. Blair Parker to wrap up our meeting.
Thank you, Roxanne. I will also add, Roxanne, that it's such a joy to work with you, and we appreciate all that you bring to the table and how good you are at your craft. I mean, you are so good at communicating, and we certainly appreciate that. So, Michael, you've got some big shoes to fill, but we know you're going to do well. We look forward to working with you. Here we are at the close of the meeting. Does anybody have any additional comments or any other items to review?
Hey, this is Rick. Hey, Ricky, I thought maybe if we let everybody take the law and rules exam and pass it, we could give them some CE credit for that. What do you think?
We can, I think that's already in there. We can do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Blair, this is Susan.
Hey, Susan.
I wanted to tell everyone goodbye. Should my replacement be appointed between now and August. It has been a wonderful journey with all of you all, and I appreciate and respect you all so much. I have learned so much professionally, and had the opportunity to learn about the engineers and the architects in a different perspective. So I want to thank you all for grooming and shaping me into a better interior designer and professional, and I wish all of you all the best.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it. Love working together with you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan. All the best.
Any additional comments, thoughts, anything to add to the board?
Yes, thanks to Susan for her service and the energy that she brought to board. Fantastic.
And this is Alton, Susan. Also, the diligence you provided. Good gracious, you've been an example for us all. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Frank. And Susan, I actually think I probably got more from you than you got from me out of this, but I really appreciate all the work you've done, especially in the grants committee. I know you've been a proponent of that and extremely strong. Probably wouldn't be where it is right now without your help in that matter.
This is Brian Tibbs. I want to also say that, Susan, you've always been very, just all your comments are very informed. And as you know, still one of the newer members, I've learned a lot from you. And like, just to echo what Frank said, you basically kind of nurtured and brought on the whole grants committee. And I hope we can continue the legacy and momentum that you already started. So congratulations and hope for more success. Real quick, also, Roxana, I know this is the second time, but once again, really appreciate how you filled in, and you're such a just a joy to work with. I mean, I can't imagine still how you do it all the time. So anyway, much success, and we look forward to working with you in the future and also with our new director.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone. And yes, I think everyone commends Susan on everything she's done on the grants. I can't imagine those without her, but we will somehow try to follow everything you've set up. Thank you all.
Hey, this is Rick.
Let's say ditto for everything that was said. And Susan, we're going to miss you dearly. And Roxana, you're just a real trooper and a professional all the way around. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Kathy.
This is Rick. One of the really true pleasures of working on boards, especially good boards like this one, is you meet quality of an individual that you appreciate in a long-term way, and you make friends with people. And I really appreciate the friendship that we've been able to make with each other over these past few years. So thank you so much. And Roxana, we'll see you around in Nashville, I'm sure. So Susan, hopefully I'll see you in Knoxville. So good luck and thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Those are very sweet words. I appreciate it.
Well, Susan, you are so appreciated all the way around. So thanks for everything. The things that I've learned from you as well have been just amazing. So I really appreciate that. Okay, here we are at the conclusion of our meeting. I hope everybody stays safe, stays well, and we will reconvene here in another couple of months. Otherwise, we will call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman Parker. We are adjourned. It is 12:15. Thank you to everyone and hope to see you all in August. Take care. Stay well.
Thank you.